accurate resource for you to use to kind of put together a list of schools that you want to apply to and kind of keep track of everything. However, they do have there's pros and cons to a program website. So if we're going to get into it, the pros of a con, just like I said earlier, they are the most accurate resource. Nothing else is as accurate as you will get coming to any resource that you're going to use for PA school. So the cons with program websites is program websites can change, or programs can change their criteria quite frequently, meaning year to year, they're going to change. Not 100%, meaning one school may not decide, their criteria may not change the following year. But this year, for instance, it'd say the same, next year it may change. Or if you looked at the criteria in January for the upcoming cycle that will start in April, at the end of April, basically May 1st, that criteria may have changed. So that's something you guys have to make sure you are paying attention to when you're organizing for PA school. So this is one of the issues with the program website. You have to find a way to make sure you know of the changes that occur on their sites. So the second issue that I've experienced myself with, when I know there's something wrong, there's contradicting information on one aspect of the program website versus on an FAQ of that same program website, the issue is when they know that there's a discrepancy, it takes some time to update this. There's a lot of times that I've spoken to students that were interviewed that came back and we got into a conversation through social media or et cetera. And they basically say, hey guys, by the way, for the next cycle, the school hasn't updated their website yet, but they're not going to take the GRE, for instance. So that's something you guys need to keep in mind. Again, it happens not as frequently, but it does occur. So take it kind of with a grain of salt, all the information on the website. Another thing that gets a little overwhelming is the way that program websites and their information is displayed. It's displayed mainly in a paragraph format. It's not displayed in a bullet point format. That's a difference with, for instance, when you guys are going to get into using Mypabox, just even as a resource to glance over schools, you'll notice that there's not a lot of paragraph style format. We tried to abstain from that for a simple reason. We want it to all look very condensed, right in your face. This is what you need to know, instead of reading through a bunch of information that you may not extract that detail that you miss because it's in a paragraph format. Now, the discrepancies between sections, I kind of shed a light about that. And that was, again, in terms of where they can say something on the prerequisites aspect and you go on the FAQs, there may be some discrepancies. It's very unlikely that that occurs because, again, the program websites are professional resources. They review the sites, but at the end of the day, they are humans. The people that update this information are human, and people make errors, and they may overlook a particular FAQ. So keep that in mind. And then, for instance, some of the things that I just spoke about do not explicitly state if something is accepted, like online courses. Not many schools say that they accept online courses. Today, with the pandemic, you guys will see a big difference in that. But maybe a year or two from now, when they take that paragraph out, hey, during the pandemic, we do accept the online courses or pass-fail courses instead of in class courses, you'll see a lot of it. But a lot of times you can miss that little fine information that the school just doesn't display it, and you have to call them and find out about this information. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please, Sergio. Thank you. There's other resources that you guys can use. A great resource, I think, is the PA Program Manual. However, it's a book. The problem with it being a book is that it's usually the information on that book is printed in January, roughly. January is when it's available for the public, right? You can order on Amazon and et cetera. The issue with it is a lot of schools change their information between January and April. So if you get a copy of it now and the school change their information a day later, the book is already outdated. So that's one of the things that I want you guys to kind of keep in mind about the resources that you guys use, is that they may be outdated from the moment that it's printed because it's a book. It can literally be, it's just that simple. The great part about it is the information's all researched for you. The only negative about it is it can be outdated the moment that you have it in your hands about a particular school or about a particular set of schools. Moving on, one of the other key things that I've noticed about that PA program manual is they miss some key information like like if a school required GRE scores, minimum GRE scores. I haven't found anywhere on the PA program that they actually state that. Same thing with Caspa deadline types. There's 3 different Caspa deadline types, and we'll get into it when we're going to be going over Caspa. So they don't mention that type, and it's actually very important because that distinguishes does it need to be just submitted, or does it need to be verified by the deadline type? So it's basically the point of why I'm addressing this is you're still going to have to go manually on the school's website or on Caspa, even if you purchase this resource, and double check what it is. So it's kind of additional work that you have to do. And then they also miss a lot of times the ACLS and basic life support certificate that you need to get for a lot of schools, but that is just a requirement to matriculate. It's not necessarily a requirement to get accepted into the program. It is a requirement to start the program once you've accepted. So guidance counselors, this is another problem that exists when you guys are researching schools. A lot of guidance counselors in your local college or anywhere that you're guiding, unless they have like a P program themselves, that school that you're applying to and the guidance counselor is very familiar with it. Guidance counselors in general are not good resources. They're probably the worst resource you can use when applying to PA school. The reason why, they're going to guide you down a road that basically tells you, hey, you got to take these general courses, which you guys already all know are science courses, to get into PA school. And that's basically the bulk of what they're going to discuss with you. Some of them may know a little bit more than others, but ultimately they don't know the detail of each particular school that might be of interest to you. So keep that in mind when you guys speak to guidance counselors, okay? Now, organizing the information. Probably if you guys are applying to PA school, you did organize in one way or another, whether you use an Excel sheet or whether you're writing in a notebook. So the pros and cons of that are as follows. At least this is kind of like what I've come up with my partner. The pro is you created it. So you've put as much detail as you think is necessary for your notebook to have about the school or your Excel sheet to have about the schools you're applying to. The problem with all that is it's very time consuming. An average person today, an average pre-P applies to about 6 to 10 schools. So if you're going to apply it to 6 to 10 schools, that means you've done your research on 6 to 10 schools. With that being said, that takes a lot of your time putting all this together when you could have used, for instance, that time to get more patient care hours, or make invest a little more time into your personal statement, or invest a little more time when you do land a mock interview and make sure that you're very well prepared for that. Basically, you can use a lot of that time spent on creating these notes and these Excel sheets on aspects of your application that you can make it better. Another thing that you guys will encounter with creating your own Excel sheet, and one thing I just want to kind of like tell you guys, I'm not discouraging you from doing this. I'm just letting you know that what are the pros and cons with it. So if you can manage the cons about it, then by all means use Excel sheets. It's cheaper, obviously, it's just time consuming. So the one thing that you guys need to account for is the updates. One of the things that we try to do with Mypabox, and we'll get into it a little bit then, but I'm going to shed a little light on it, is how do we stay up to date? We update all the information in the beginning of the cycle from roughly February to right when Casper opens up. We go through all the schools, make sure that all information's as updated as it can be. Another thing that we have is we have roughly 14,000 people that have created an account to Mypabox. They have the ability to let us know, my partner or me, know that, hey, something was updated. When they do that, it takes us 5 minutes to update that on the website. So unless you guys have a strategy like that implemented for the 10, 15 schools that you might be applying to, where if you know that, if you don't know they updated something, somebody can let you know that there was an update, that's great. But if you don't have that, your Excel sheet may be obsolete as soon as there's one change. And some schools literally change drastic prerequisites that they have, or their whole thing is changed drastically. It's like, wow, I just looked at it 2 months ago and today it's like a completely different prereq system that they're using. So, and I've experienced it myself when I update schools. It's like black and white for me. It's like, wow, how can you just do that in one cycle, all of a sudden change all this? But anyway, they have the right to do that. Excel sheets, again, are just prone to mistakes. You guys may miss a requirement that you think is not important. I'll give you one example. So some schools, some PA schools may say, hey, we need a microbiology course that's 3 credits versus 4 credits. One school may say 4 credits, right? You took a microbi that's 3 credits and it's not 4 credits. And when you basically apply to that school, they may disqualify you or just not accept the application just because it didn't meet the standard just on the credit wise. And that is the key information that I'm saying. It's like the details of your site, the application information you may miss when you create your own Excel sheet. You may say that you do need a microbio, right? But you may not include, does it need a lab? Is it 4 credits? Is it 3 credits? It's examples like this that a lot of students I've noticed is where they lack the detailed information when they create their own notes. And then the differences with Mypabox versus Excel sheets and notebooks. On Excel sheet for you guys, obviously, take a look. Sergio, you want to go back one slide?
Yeah.
Where's the Excel sheet? Sorry. Yeah, if you guys know, this is linear, right? It's huge, it's lengthy, versus it's not interactive with you. With Mypabox, when we'll get into it, you guys will notice that there's a lot of interaction that goes on with you and the information that is displayed, where you can play around with it and it can give you information that you're really looking for in a very simple manner. So that's pretty much kind of like the organization. Sergio, what's the next slide?
So next slide is Caspa. So those of you who are not familiar with it, Caspa is the centralized application service for physician assistants. This is where majority of the programs they participate with this service, where you would go and put in all your information, which we'll get into in a second, and you submit to those programs that are participating in Caspa. Very few of the programs, Jacob, I would say probably not even 5%. There are some schools that do not participate with Caspa, and you would have to directly apply to that program. But majority of the programs are going to be, you're going to be applying through here. There are 4 sections of Caspa, which are listed here, and we'll go through them in a second, and which you could actually get started here. So you make an account on Caspa, and you can make an account at any point. Let me just log in here. Once you create an account, you will be placed in front of this screen. So we're going to go through each individual tab. So your My Application Status, you'll notice you have your personal information. Once you click here, you can start filling out majority of this information, right? So you'll notice here, it's a lot of lengthy things as far as a release statement. You can read that, click on agree, advisor release. You can click on that as well and save it. Next section you'll have is some biographic information. So you'll put your name, your basic demographic information that you have here, any contact information. So make sure this information is filled out properly, because the schools will also be using this information to contact you, your phone number, your email address. So kind of really be meticulous about making sure there's no errors here. Next thing you'll notice is citizenship information. So, what your citizenship is. This will also be dependent on whether you have to take the TOEFL and things like that, which are English proficiency exams. Race and ethnicity. So a lot of this is used to, look at demographics and to look at the data as far as who's applying, what their races are, things like that, and what, PA programs can possibly do differently to, be more inclusive. So you have your family information here. You can add a parent or guardian, what the relationship is, occupation, and things like that, all in this section. And then you have environmental factors. So this is a lot of personal things that are going to be in there. So once you guys kind of scroll through this, it'll kind of ask you, like what your living environment was when you were growing up, things like that. So some of it is required. Like, for example, you had a felony and things like that. Make sure, guys, if there were any felonies or any legal actions taken against you, do not, lie about that. Some schools will have background checks and things like that. I think majority probably do. But, make sure you fill this out properly. I've personally known someone that reached out to us on DMs that they were kicked out of a PA program because, they found out that they had a felony. So make sure this information is accurate. Next thing you'll notice is academic history. So once you fill that out, you'll get to your academic history. So this, you'll notice the high school where you attended. So again, you would put your high school name, your city, your state, when you graduated, and then you'll get down to the college. So over here, I'm just going to quickly fill out certain parts. So say I went to Rutgers, right? So you'll fill that out. Do I plan to obtain a degree? Yes, a degree was awarded. It'll ask you what type of degree I had. So just for argument's sake, I'll just put that, which month and year, and what was my major, right? So say administration, and I had no minor. And if you were a double major, you would fill that out here. And then this is very important, what type of term system, because the way, which we'll get to in a second, of how Caspa will calculate your GPA is very important, whether it was a quarter or semester system or trimester. So are you still attending? No. And when were your first dates, your first semester and your last semester? So make sure you keep all this information, handy, which you also will get, in your transcript as well. So let me just put 2021, click save. Oh, degree date. So see, it will tell you that if you missed something, where did I miss it? Please verify the degree date. Where is it?
You said 2029 for your degree right there in the above grade.
Oh, right here. Gotcha. Sorry. So what did I put? 2015. So let's do 2021. Right. Where'd it go? There we go. Thank you. There you go. Perfect. So next thing is your transcript. So once you put in all your colleges that you've attended, whether you got a degree from there or not, that will get filled out here. And then you also have to make sure the transcripts are received by Caspa, because the Caspa is associated with like clearinghouses and things like that, that will verify, which, whether your transcript is accurate or not, and whether you actually attended that university. Then you'll get to this section, which is the transcript entry, right? So for example, I have Rutgers University. For every college that you attended, you have to fill out certain information. So for example, what was my first semester, right? So say if it was winter, and I hope it doesn't give me an error because I do not remember the years. So 2015 and freshman, and this is completed. Now, under that semester, I would add the courses that I've taken. So say, for example, if I've taken bio, and then you have to associate every single course that you've taken with a Caspa subject category. Now, the reason why this is important is because this will determine whether that subject category that you're going to categorize your course in is going to be a science or non-science, or the BCA, I believe it is. So there's different ways that Caspa calculates the GPAs and presents it to the school. And the way that you categorize this is going to determine those different GPAs. So make sure this is accurate. Now, Caspa does have a website, which we'll get to in a second, that allows you to decide which subject category you should put, which might be considered your particular course. Just in case if you assign your courses wrong, Caspa will readjust it. Also, there is a chance that Caspa might recalculate those courses and adjust them in a different category, which might change your science or non-science GPA. So once Caspa calculates all this information, it's always a good idea to go back and double check just 100%. To make sure that everything is accurate. So as you can notice, so based on your whole transcript, you're going to have to manually enter all this in. Now, the reason that's important is that, so for example, let me just kind of quickly go over that. So I've added this. Now I can add another semester and so on and so forth. So you guys kind of get an idea of how this is going to look. This probably can be very time consuming. Obviously, if you've attended a lot of universities and you've taken a lot of courses, but that's just something you have to do. Caspa does have a transcript entry service that I believe is $69 that you can, once you submit your transcripts to Caspa, they will enter this for you. But again, just double check the way that they are presenting this information, they're entering your courses. Because they, again, even the transcript entry service can be done inaccurately. Next section is your, so you gotta save that. So next section is going to be your standardized tests. this is where you're going to add in, whether you took your TOEFL, your MCAT, or your GRE, or if there is a new exam like the PA CAT, which some schools are requiring, all that information would go here. So for example, if you were entering the GRE, have you taken it? Yes. When did you last take it? You would put in, you put in the date, or I don't know which, 2021. Okay. Your ETS registration code and your scores that you're, that you're going to get from the GRE. And then you can save that test. And that is going to be the section for your personal state, let me go back from here, for your academic history. Next thing is going to be your supporting information. So this is a section where you're going to put in, for example, your evaluations, your experiences, all your achievements, licenses, certifications, essay, and membership. So how evaluations or your letter recommendations work is that you have to enter, and again, we cannot do this because we've passed that cycle date, but you would create an evaluation request. So you would put in the information of the person that's going to be writing your letter recommendation. You're going to put their name, their email, and their contact information. Caspa will then generate a link and send a link to that person, and that person will go on that link, create an account, and upload the letter recommendation. You will not directly get to see that letter recommendation. There is a section when you do this that you would have to click to waive your right to view that letter. From what I've heard, and Trina and Kristy can shed light on this later, is that most schools look down upon that. So make sure you waive that right. But that is how the evaluation sections are filled out. So you can have total of minimum of 3, but you can have maximum up to 5 letter recommendations. Next thing is your experiences. So this is the section where you're going to put your patient care or your volunteer community service or your healthcare experience in this section. So to kind of quickly go over that, you would add your different experience types. So if I click down here, you'll notice here I have all my extracurricular activities, healthcare, leadership, patient care, research, shadowing, teaching, and volunteer. So for example, if I put something as patient care, it'll ask me for all this information. So I'm just going to put all just to save time, when my start date was. So let's put my current experience, when my end date was, what the status was, whether it was part-time or full-time, what my title was, the type of recognition, whether it was paid or, where I received academic credit or volunteer. So this is important because some schools will require that you have paid experience and other schools don't. So it's very important that you fill this out. Then you have your average weekly hours that you worked multiplied by the number of weeks that you worked there, and that calculates your total hours. Then you'll have your description of key responsibilities. So this is important because that's how the Caspa will verify, and the school will know whether that experience is patient care or healthcare experience, right? Depending on what you're doing. Because for example, every PA program will look at scribing as differently. Some schools will accept that as patient care, other schools will not accept it. So, it's very important that you kind of keep track of, what exactly your responsibilities are. So this way they can verify that. And then you have your release authorization, which you would check off. Now to keep in mind, it does have a minimum character count of 600. So, that's very important that you fill that out. Next section.
Just go over the character type. Sorry, guys. I just want to kind of intervene with that, with this character type. Just want you to know that does include spaces.
Yes.
So if you guys have a question about, I know we've had plenty of questions about in terms of personal statement and experience responsibility and things you can type up. It does include spaces. So it's not a word count. It's a total character count, which is 600.
And it also includes commas, periods, and quotations.
Yeah, so any space, any character. It's 600 characters from the start to finish.
Yeah. Next section, you have your achievements. So if you've had any, leadership achievements, things like that, you can enter that here, whether awards, honors, scholarships, or publications. So all that information will go here. Next thing is your license and certifications. So for example, if you have like the ACLS, BLS that Jacob was referring to, all that information would be filled out here. And again, you have a section for a brief description of that character count. Essay. This is where your personal statement will go. Obviously, you're going to be writing that on a Google Doc or however you guys are writing that Word document. And then again, there has a 5,000 character count as well. But this is where it's going to go and how the schools will get it. Then you have your membership. So if you were a part of any professional membership, your state organizations, pre-PA clubs, things like that, that would all go here. And then you would have to write your role and contribution to that group. So all of you that are, in pre-PA clubs or hold, any seats on the executive boards, that'll be a good place to kind of talk about that. And then we get to the program materials. So this is a section where not every program you'll see that you're applying to would be available here. Now, again, we are doing this towards the end of the cycle, so I only have one program added here. But if you click here, you'll notice here, you'll get some basic information regarding the program that I'm applying to. And then if there's any documents, right, if there's any military papers that the program requires, license certifications, CLEP exams if the program accepts it, all that would be uploaded here under this section, right? So this, and Trina and Kristy can probably shed a little bit more light on this if they need to, but this is where all that information go. If you're not adding anything, you would just click that. Next thing is your prerequisites. So, once you've added in your prerequisites, it does not tell you that you've, completed everything, but it'll kind of give you an outline as far as, what is there. Again, not every program that you will be applying to will have this section available, but most of them do. Now, how you add the programs that you're applying to. So again, a lot of there's no available programs for this cycle, but if I was to filter from the past or future programs, you'll notice here I have a list of all the programs that I can apply to that are participating with Caspa. Over here, you would notice a plus sign, which I would add. Once I've added that program, it would show up under my submit application. Once all my information is done, I would click submit, and then I can check the status of that school, of that program. Kristy and Trina, if you guys would like to add anything on this section, you guys can feel free to do so.
I think that you guys have gone over everything. There was a question in the chat that I saw about if you sent your application early and then you didn't get into the programs you selected, can you resubmit? And so the answer to that question is yes, you can. SCU gets applications late in our cycle. Just make sure that you know the deadlines of all the programs, because as Jacob and as they both have said, there's different deadlines. So you just want to make sure that you get it in beforehand. And then also whatever information you submitted, that may not be updated for the new program. So you may have submitted to maybe 10 programs early on, and then you didn't get into those, or you didn't get an interview, and now you want to submit to other programs. You need to make sure that the new programs you're going to submit to after the fact, you're still meeting those guidelines and requirements. So I don't know if either one of you want to extend on that, but that's really important.
Got it.
That's all.
Perfect. So that, guys, pretty much is a quick overview of Caspa. So now you guys kind of understand, what the whole
Sergio, can I make one point on what Trina just said? So it's actually very important what Trina just went over, that if you apply to a certain set of schools and now you can't, once you submit your Casper application, you cannot manipulate it in terms of, you can't adjust the information on the application, but you can't adjust the schools that you apply to, meaning you would have to pay more to apply to more schools. The problem is you didn't do research on those schools, and you may be missing requirements for those new set of schools that you're trying to apply to. So make sure that your current application that you want to use for these new batch of schools within the same cycle, that you're actually meeting the minimum requirements, or what's going to happen is you're literally just throwing away the fees per school. So keep that in mind, because you can lose a lot of money that way.
Absolutely. So,
and I just, sorry, one more quick thing. So, for example, an example of a requirement that's not required by a lot of programs is Our program requires sociology. So that's not required by a lot of other programs. And then also, as they both have mentioned, there's varying clinical experiences, hours, whether they're paid or not. And so those are just two examples. It could be a class or it could be a clinical experience. So that's why it's so important to make sure that when you submit whatever you have, it's gonna, fulfill those requirements. Otherwise, like they said, you're just wasting your money. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, the pros of applying to Caspase is that it's a centralized place for you to submit your application. When Jacob and I applied, back in the day, we directly applied to Toro, right? There was no, so if you were applying to 7-8 programs, you guys can see, that could get time consuming, like sending out all your transcript to each and every single program that you're applying to, all your letter recommendations, copies, and things like that. So it really saves you time. The cons are that it does not have the program specific requirements. So as Jacob mentioned, you still have to go on each and every single program's website, look at the requirements, make an Excel sheet or organize however way you're organizing, and then make sure you have all the requirements and then submit your application through there. Information can be lost from cycle to cycle. We've personally heard of stories as that. So everything does get carried over according to Caspa, besides your letter recommendations or evaluations and your personal statement. So that's something you're going to have to create an evaluation request every new cycle. But I've heard of people, lose their healthcare experience that they've added or something glitched out because when you, for example, if you make an account now and you're not applying till 2 cycles, every cycle Caspa will ask you, do you want to transfer your data over? And that data merge can take a couple of days, and then Caspa will notify you that, hey, this data has been transferred. Right. But again, things can be lost. So you really don't want to use Caspa as an organization tool. A, it just doesn't have all the information, and B, it's not reliable for you to do that. Obviously, you guys saw as I was adding in the transcripts, it can be very time consuming, making sure that you're associating your subject category appropriately, because again, that will really affect your GPA calculations that Caspa is going to do. And guess what? If a program has a 3.0 requirement and they're part of Caspa, that GPA is going to be calculated according to how Caspa calculates it. And if you assign your course inaccurately and your GPA is a 2.9 by any chance, your assigned GPA, you will get rejected from that program, right? So it's very important to kind of pay attention to those subject categories. And that's the other point that we were referring to. So now, notice here we have Mypabox. So Mypabox is a tool to help you organize for this whole process, right? Before you even apply, to help you organize, and even before you get to Caspa. Now, how Mypabox works, you'll notice here we have 302 all the PA programs that are in the US. Well, for example, we'll go to Advent Health as a sample. First thing you'll notice here is the report button. So as Jacob mentioned throughout the presentation, program websites, there could be an error, there could be a delay. We personally had emails. For example, one of the emails and reports that we got was from a student that told us that Western University will now require community service hours, and it's not updated on their website. And how she found out was because as she was interviewing, that had become a requirement, and there was a delay in that requirement and being updated on the website. Even Mypabox, there can be an error, right? And that's why we have the report button. Like just the way that you guys use Waze and report that police officer that's hiding and things like that, that's what we guys want you to be our eyes and ears. And for this whole pre-PA community, just the way you guys are helping each other out in the chat, to help us make this platform even the most reliable resource out there. Obviously, Jacob and I have our internal processes that we run to make sure this information is accurate, but anything can be missed. So always double check. So we have the phone number for the program here, the email, the address, as well as the program's website, right? So everything is organized for you in one place. This way you can kind of keep track and make sure, all this information is accurate. Next thing you'll notice here is the information tab. So accreditation status. Now, why is that important as a pre-PA? This will kind of give you an idea of how well the program is doing. So for example, if you're not familiar with certain terms, which you might not be as a pre-PA, we have little info icons explaining those terms. So the ARC-PA, which is the accrediting body for the PA programs, gives, has the accreditation status as far as, kind of, to put it in a nutshell, how well the program is preparing their students to take the boards, how well their clinical rotation sites are, the program material, things like that. There are different types of accreditation statuses, which you guys can see over here, right? And each status, you have a little description as far as what that status means. Now, Jacob and I recently found out with one of our affiliates that he was kicked out of not kicked out, but their PA program lost accreditation status while he was in, I think, didactic year or clinical year, Jacob?
So I'll give you an example. It wasn't even like it was yesterday. It was Heritage University. So
Yeah.
they just lost their accreditation. So in that scenario, so as of this cycle, you can't apply to that school. People that are in that school right now basically are scattering to find another school that will accept them to basically fulfill the rest of their requirement based on what I understood of what that student was telling me.
Correct. So it is very important for you to kind of, once, if you get interviewed at a particular program, this is a question that I would ask if I was being interviewed. And, when they ask you, hey, what would you want to ask us? If accreditation status is probationary or provisional, things like that, that's something that you guys can bring up. Now, one other thing is if a program is brand new, they're automatically going to be a provisional status. So that means their PANCE rates are not going to be up and things like that. So
not for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Not for the first 2 years, because that's how, well, let's give a straight example. So if the program is 28 months or 24 months or 32 months, the students are going to be taking the PANCE at the end of that time frame. So the PANCE results will only be available once the first students actually take the license exam, which can be 2 years or 3 years, depending on the length of the program at the end of it. So keep that in mind when you're applying to provisional schools.
Yeah, perfect. So next thing you'll notice here is the PANCE rate, which is the board exam that would have to take once you graduate PA school. So again, as a pre-PA applicant, it's important to choose a school with a high PANCE rate, right? Generally above 90. Again, if this is not a make it or break it for you as a pre-PA applicant, if I got into a program that had, a little bit less than a 90, it's okay. But again, I would kind of bring that up during the interview process and ask them, what they're doing to bring that PANCE rate up, things like that. Next thing you'll notice is program details. So you'll get information as far as the, full-time program duration, the class size, on-campus housing, whether they have a cadaver lab or not. Some programs use software for you to do your anatomy. Other schools have actual cadaver labs. And then you'll get to the application information, right? So as far as when that deadline date is, where the application is submitted to, and what that deadline type is. For example, if the program is a verified deadline type, that means all your information, your payments, your transcript, letter of recommendations must be received and verified by the deadline date. So that means Casper recommends that you complete your application at least 4 weeks. So approximately 1 month before the deadline date, right? To make sure all your information is submitted and verified. Some schools will have a supplemental application. And if there is a link, or if it's only provided by invitation only, it'll be listed here and what the cost of that is. And then you'll notice the mission statement of the program and when is the last time that this information was verified. FAQ, this is something that we recently launched. So a lot of, this is a section where students can search for different FAQs that the program has on their website, or any particular FAQs that the admission committee would like answered. If they notice they're getting a lot of common questions in that cycle, that would be here. And then you'll get to the requirements. So for example, a bachelor's degree is required for this particular program. GPA, they have a minimum GPA of 3.0. Again, if they are a Caspa participant, which we'll get to in a second, this GPA is not going to be your undergrad GPA. This is going to be the Caspa GPA. The next thing the data that Mypabox provides is average GPA accepted previous cycle. Now, this is again not something that's set in stone. If I have a GPA of 3.2, that means I meet the minimum, but I don't have a 3.6. There's a chance I might get in because I have a lot of good healthcare or patient care experience. My personal statement is on point, and overall I'm a pretty strong applicant. There's a chance that the admission committee might accept me, but this is kind of giving you a general idea based on the data, what the admission committee is really accepted in the previous cycle and what they're looking for. Next thing you'll notice are the prerequisites. So you'll notice here, this particular program requires these 6 courses, all right? And if we go down here, some programs require either or what we call optional courses. So for example, you could either take organic chemistry 2 or biochemistry, or one of the following from here, or one of the following from these 3. So you have options as far as what categories you can pick from here. So we kind of, again, if you're going through the what programs websites and things like that, it can kind of get a little bit of tricky. Next thing you'll notice here is minimum grade C is required for all prerequisites. So for example, if this is the minimum requirement for this particular program, if you have a C minus, then there's a chance you might not get accepted, right? Because that's their minimum grade. Now, Trina and Kristy will get into a, holistic review and things like that, which they'll kind of elaborate more on. But for majority of the programs, make sure you're meeting the minimum requirement. Next thing you'll notice, there are pending prerequisite conditions. So some schools, for example, will tell you that you have to complete all your prerequisites before applying. Some schools will tell you that you could have a maximum of 3 courses or 2 prerequisites or a maximum amount of credits pending while applying. Some schools will tell you that, hey, you could have this many amount of pending, but you need to complete them by spring semester or fall semester, things like that. So again, keep that in mind. And again, if we look at 7 different PA programs, all 7 programs will have different requirements. And I'll quickly show you 2 other schools. So this way you guys visually see, what we're talking about. So next thing is community college credits, online courses, AP credits, pass-fail grade, and CLEP. So whether you've taken a lot of time we get asked the question like, hey, can I take course at community college, or will the program accept community college credits? You have to do the research and look at the programs that you're applying to. You could be applying to a pool of 7 schools that do not require, all 7 of them don't require community college credits. So guess what? Your community college credits are out the window. They're not going to accept it. Or you could have all 7 schools that do accept it, or you could have half and half. So you really have to do this information and kind of, keep track of that, whether, you need to take that or not. Healthcare experience. So some schools will require for you to have certain hours. Other schools will recommend it. As competitive as it is applying to PA school, what I usually tell, people that I'm advising and mentoring, if it's recommended by the program, think of it as a requirement, right? Because it is going to help you stand out. And we have a different type of experience that the program will accept. We always tell students to contact the program directly because this is something that they can constantly change. So it's always a good idea to follow up with the program. And again, we have the data that tells you the average that was accepted in the previous cycle. Next thing you'll notice, PA shadowing. Some schools require it, other schools recommend it. And so if it's required, it'll be listed here. Evaluations. This is another common question that we get. So you have a minimum amount of evaluations that are required. Some schools will want specific letter recommendations from specific writers. So for example, some schools will tell you university professor or your employer and any medical professional. Another program can have complete different set of requirements. So start doing this research early on and having a general idea of who you're going to be asking for your letter recommendations. GRE, if it's required, it will be listed here. If it's not required, it will obviously show up like that. Casper, probably one of my favorite standardized exams out there compared to the GRE, which is a glorified SAT, and the PA CAT, which, who knows where that's going. But Casper is a personality-based exam. Usually when I was a preceptor for the PA, for the York PA program, I would tell students like, hey, I can teach you, a chest pain comes in, everything is now pretty much an algorithm in medicine. Chest pain comes in, you do an EKG, you do troponin, you do this. Abdominal pain comes in, these are the physical exam findings you'll find to make you worried about appendicitis, things like that. But what I cannot teach you is how to make a patient feel comfortable when they're anxious and they're there in their room, or how to know which patient is, wants to get in and out quicker and they really don't want you to joke around and waste their time versus the one that needs a little bit of that extra time. And all that comes from these factors. And I really, truly believe that this test for things that are, now, how do they test for it? I'm not sure. But I feel like more schools should be using this as a standardized exam than the GRE and things like that. But again, that was my rant on the Casper. PA CAT. So again, very similar to the MCAT as far as what they test the students on. Some schools are requiring it. And they're piloting that information, other programs are not. So it's always a good idea to do your research. and look at if the program requires that exam and you have to take it. International students, so this is a section if English is not your first language or if you're an international student, you have to take the TOEFL, and that information would be provided here. Last section on this is the message board. So this is something that we launched about approximately a couple of months ago. And this is a section for where we're getting schools on board, like we have Advent and Southern California, where you can ask the PA program or the admission committee questions directly. And believe me or not, just like the form that you guys filled out, a lot of these questions are repetitive, right? So we tried to make this just like you have the physician assistant forum where people are asking different questions about different topics. Well, we gave you a chance to ask that particular program that you're interested in applying to that question. And the thing is that this thing is searchable, right? So say, for example, if I had a question about direct patient care or things like that, I can search for it and see if the admission committee members have asked, or a student has asked the question and then they have answered this before. Because again, trust me, Trina will be very thankful if she could cut down on the emails and phone calls that they get. So this in a nutshell is Mypabox. This is the information that we provide. And just to quickly kind of show you guys, if we look at Albany Medical, for example, look at their GPA, no minimum requirement. That means if I apply with a 2.4, my application will not get rejected. They will at least look at it. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll get in, because look at the average that they're accepting, but it's not going to get rejected. Prerequisites. Now, if you look at their courses, completely different, right?
But with that said, Sergio,
yes,
I'm sorry to intervene. With that said, will it be smart for someone to apply to a program like that with a 2.0 GPA?
That was
probably not.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind with what we're telling you, that just because you may meet, a school may not have a minimum, or you did meet the minimum, but you see that their average that they accept is significantly higher than your GPA, it's probably not a good idea to apply to that school. I'm not discouraging you from applying to that school if you feel like, hey, other aspects of the application make you stand out outside of your GPA. Just understand that GPA is a big factor when they're just skimming through 1,000 people similar to yourself. So imagine basically put yourself in the admission team's shoes, and would you look at someone from that regard? That's how you guys have to look at your own application as well, okay?
So the next thing you guys will notice, time frame conditions, right? So admin did not have that, but Albany Medical says that, hey, the following prerequisites must be completed within 5 years. So if you are a freshman taking biology 1 and chemistry 1 in your freshman year, you graduated in 4 years, took a 2-year gap year, well, you're getting close to this, right? That means you might have to retake this. So keep this information in mind. And you notice with this particular program, prerequisites can be progress at the time of application. They don't specify the amount of courses or minimum courses and things like that. Healthcare experience, you'll notice here, minimum they require 1,000. What they accept in the previous cycle was this amount. PA shadowing, this particular program does not recommend it and does not require it. Evaluations, they require 3. It can be from anyone. They don't have specific requirements, and GRE is not required. And if we looked at 10 different schools, you would notice 10 different requirements. We have yet to see one school that's exactly the same. Next section is the school match. Now, for example, this is where you really start organizing and kind of really narrowing down which programs you can apply to. Tuition. So if say tuition, which is a very important factor, which there's probably a talk for another day. If I wanted to look at how many programs in the US, so I'm going to leave the states blank for now, but how many programs in the US are under 50 to 100,000 or 100, this range, I can, filter from there if that's a factor, but we'll leave that blank as well. Accreditation status, right? What we kind of briefly spoke about. So if I only wanted to apply to schools that were continued, out of the 302, there are 200 programs that are continued. Now, minimum GPA. So for example, if I have a argument's sake, say if I had a 2.8, there are still 38 programs that I can apply to that will at least look at my GPA. Same thing with the science GPA, but for argument's sake, we'll leave it at 3.6 and we'll leave this at 3.6 as well. Prerequisites. If I did not take organic chemistry, or I do not want to take organic chemistry because chemistry is not my forte, what you can do is click on exclude, go down to organic chemistry, check this off. There's still 136 PA programs in the US that I could apply to. Say if I also didn't want to take biochemistry, 66 programs that I can apply to. So that's where you can use a prerequisite filter to kind of really narrow down the schools. Patient care experience hours. So say if I only had 500 hours, so you'll notice here, it's narrowing it down to 46. For argument's sake, we'll leave it at 5,000. PA shadowing. So a lot of students are having a hard time, at least in-person shadowing a PA. If you wanted to look at schools that don't require PA shadowing, you'll notice here a significant drop, right? So if in this filter that I've selected, I click on not required, I'm down to 10 programs. So what this tells me, if I'm using this filter, maybe I should focus my energy on really trying to get PA shadowing, because I'm really cutting down my, my pool of schools. Now, I can go back here and change, for example, take organic chemistry off and now click on PA shadowing. Okay, 36. So I hope you guys understand this, because it's a very common question we get, like, hey, I was using the filter. I feel like a lot of students don't use the filter to kind of really guide them in the way, like, what should be the steps that I should be taking? Should I focus on getting PA shadowing even though it's hard? Yes or no? Or can I change other things around? And maybe I can take organic chemistry, things like that. So play around with this. Same thing with the exams. So if you do not want to take the GRE, click on not required, 16 programs, pretty good number. So you know what, maybe I won't take the GRE. Or if you want to take it, 36 programs I can apply to. Same thing with the PA CAT. So don't require it. So that's 16 programs. Or Casper, don't require it. I'm down to 13. Program details. So rolling admissions versus non-rolling, very important factor, because rolling admissions is first come, first serve. So that means as soon as Caspa opens up, schools will start looking at this information, looking at your application as it comes, first come, first serve. If they like you as an applicant or you stand out, they'll call you in for an interview and they'll offer you a spot, right? So if you're applying to schools that are rolling admissions, don't wait till later on in the cycle, because there's a chance that you could have already lost that seat, right? So keep that in mind and really kind of keep track of all this. Whether they have cadaver lab or part-time option or on-campus housing, you can filter from all that here. And then application deadline. So that's the question that we actually got, was if I was applying late in the cycle, so there's going to be no school that's going to be available yet, but if I was applying late in the cycle and I did not hear back from any programs, and I'm like, you know what, what other programs can I apply to? That's where you would use the application deadline filter and see which programs were available still in the cycle. Now, if I click on view results, you'll notice here, there's 13 programs that I matched up with, which are all here, but there are 6 programs that our algorithm recommends. So now keep in mind the 3.6 overall in science and the 5,000 healthcare experience. So you'll notice here, some schools are recommended, right? And some schools are highly recommended. So let's look at Marist College, for example. If we go to their requirements, you look at their GPA, so you'll notice minimum is a 3.0, which I meet, right? I have a 3.6, 3.7 or 6. And then the average GPA that was accepted in the previous cycle. So I have way above that, right? I'm above that. That is one factor the algorithm looks at. The other factor it looks at is obviously you meet the minimum healthcare as well as the average healthcare experience that was accepted. I put 5,000 hours. In our opinion, if you at least meet that minimum GPA that the admission committee accepted, as well as the average healthcare hours, that's a school that you have a very strong chance of at least getting called in for an interview. And that's why that school is highly recommended. So again, use this as a tool to kind of really help you narrow down the schools that you have a good chance of getting into. Once you're interested in a particular program, you click on save, and you'll notice here, Marist College is now in my saved dashboard. Now, if I'll look at a couple of programs here. So let's look at California State University, right? You'll notice here, everything is broken down into what is required, right? So required is here. If we look at another program, let's look at Chapman, for example. Required is in one box and recommended is in another box, because you have to at least meet the minimum requirements in order for you to apply, right? If you go back to California State, you'll notice here, you have your minimum GPA. So we'll get there in a second as far as where this is getting calculated, and you have your Caspa GPA, which is my Caspa GPA is 2.9 and 3.3. So you'll notice here, my science GPA is checked off as green, but my overall, which is a 2.9, is still checked off as red. Prerequisites, you'll notice here, I have, out of all these, I have 2 prerequisites pending, microbiology with 4 credits and bio 1. Next thing you'll notice here is healthcare experience. So the school requires 1,000 hours and I have 0 hours. Same thing with community service. They require 500 hours. I have 0 hours. Same thing with PA shadowing. They only require 8 hours and I have 0. So, and evaluations, right? So they require 2 evaluations. One of the following must be from any of these. Now, where is this information coming from? In your dashboard, you'll have a section for your grades. This is where, and again, we already went over in Caspa, so you guys will see how Mypabox is preparing you and helping you organize for everything that you're going to need to enter into Caspa. So you put in your college name, right? So just the way I had put in Rutgers, your start date, your college type, which is a 4-year, your college term, degree in progress, completed, all this information is already going to be in there. You add, and you notice here Rutgers shows up. Once I go there, I can add my semester. So again, very similar to what Caspa was asking you, right? So you're instead of doing this at the time of, you're doing this beforehand. So now my semester is here and you can add your course. So let's do microbiology, course grade. We'll say we got a A+, 4 credits with lab. If your lab grade was separate and your credits were separate, you would fill them out here. That's very important for how Caspa is going to calculate your GPA. Whether it was online, pass, fail. If you do not see your course there, you can add your own course. Now, this is a link for what we were discussing earlier of how to associate your courses with the Caspa categories, right? So all that information is here. You would literally have to command find this and kind of find this information. But, oh, where'd it go?
You have to minimize it, Sergio. You're
Minimize what?
like you have, oh yeah, you're back on it, okay.
So that information is filled out here. So 1 second, I think I just refreshed it. Yeah, so Rutgers, right? So, oh, sorry, I have to do this again real quick. So you got A+, 4 with lab, leave that blank, and I add my course. Now my course shows up here, microbiology. Now you'll notice one thing, it automatically calculates your Caspa GPA for you. The other thing you'll notice here is this is what my undergrad GPA was, and this is what my college GPA is. Now, if I go back to my saved school, go back to California State, now you'll notice my GPA is checked off as green because my Caspa GPA is a 3.03. As you are completing all these requirements, now you'll notice here courses, 1 is pending because microbiome that I put in is checked off. As you go and put in all this information into your dashboard, the algorithm will look at what is required by the program. So you'll notice here, I'm not eligible to apply to Chapman because their minimum is a 3.2. Mine is a 3.03. So it will keep track of, you'll notice here for this particular program, I have 10 courses pending versus 1 for California because every program is going to be different, right? So they require sociology as well. So you guys kind of get an idea of how much time and where this, the Excel sheet is out the door, right? Because the algorithm, it's interactive. What Jacob was talking about, it's not linear. What you're putting in, not only is it allowing you to track everything, but it's also comparing and letting you know once everything is completed. Same thing with PA shadowing, right? So say, for example, if I was shadowing myself, I can fill out this information. And again, you're going to need this for later on. I can log my hours here, right? So for example, if I shadowed someone today for 10 hours, I can add the hours here. And if I go back to the school, now you'll notice here it's a 43% because this particular program required PA shadowing 8 hours and I've completed it. Same thing with healthcare experience. So you can add your different type of experience. Again, very similar to what Caspa was asking you. That's why we asked you this information beforehand. Because again, if you're getting your healthcare experience now, you might not have your health supervisor's information, or you might not know the address and you have to put that information in there. You can log your hours as you go and keep track of that information here. Same thing once you go back to this particular program, healthcare experience, I only have 5 hours. I have 995 hours still pending out of the 1,000. Same thing, I have 0 community service. So it will kind of keep track and let you know what you need to do. Same thing with letter recommendations. I personally have known people that got rejected from a particular program because the program required 1 letter from a PA, and the PA that they asked for the letter recommendation from did not fill out that evaluation request that Caspa sent on time, and they got rejected from that program. I personally have known someone like that. So it's always good to kind of keep track of, for example, hey, I'm planning on requesting this person. Okay, have I filled out their information? They agreed to write to it. I've submitted it on Caspa and I've received it. Because if you submit it on Caspa and this person hasn't really completed it, you can kind of send them a friendly reminder like, hey, my deadlines for my PA schools are coming up. Do you mind, it's time sensitive. Do you mind just filling this out? So this allows you to kind of keep track of it. Caspa is just a place for you to submit your evaluations. Mypabox is a tool to help you. And I hope you guys see the difference, because a lot of people are like, hey, why don't I just organize in Caspa? Because Caspa is not helping you. It's not really acting as a checkpoint of what you need to do, what is pending, and what your next steps are. We are working on version 2.0, which we are, you guys are going to be amazed by it, hopefully. There's going to be a blueprint section in there and a lot of cool things, a section for you to even write your personal statement. That's all going to be in there. Your exam section. So this is where you would add your Casper exams, your GRE, PA-CAT, things like that. All that would go here. And then again, once it's added in, it would show up here. Resources is a section for you to we have books here. They're all linked through Amazon. You guys can go and purchase stuff like that. And then we have your equipment here as well, where you could get that you need for PA schools. Some schools have their own list of things. And then we have services, which we just recently launched. We have a former PA school admission committee member that is in charge of doing all this. So we have mock interviews, personal statement review, and supplemental essay review. So like any supplemental essays, things like that. Because again, it's very important, which again, Kristy and Trina will get into, as far as making sure, you've kind of prepared yourself for the mock interview and really have your personal statement on point. Just because it's very competitive and you just really want to do your best and put your best foot forward. And that, in a nutshell, is Mypabox. So we do have a 25% off annual subscription code. If you use this code PA2021, it would give you 25% off. That code is active, Jacob, until tomorrow, correct? It's only for 24 hours.
So let me get into the detail of this code. A lot of you guys kind of in the questionnaire asked, can we get a discount, etc. So this is basically providing you guys a 25% discount off of Mypabox. A lot of people are asking questions about, a few questions about the pricing in the current chat right now. So the current pricing of Mypabox is $65 for the year. Now, this information, all the information on Mypabox is saved. For instance, if you use Mypabox and are planning to apply 2 years from now, but use it today for the first year, and then your membership expires, your subscription expires, does that information save? Yes, it does save. When you resubscribe the following year, you're going to have access to it. But if you chose to take a gap year from Mypabox itself, because you don't need that information for whatever reason, it is still saved. Okay, so that answers a lot of the questions. Number two, it's $65 for the year. We do not have a monthly pricing plan. There's plenty of promo codes that exist on social media, especially on Instagram. We have a lot of affiliates that work with us to provide you guys a 15% discount. That lowers the price down to $55 for the year. Now, if you subscribe, you cannot use a promo code the following year as well, meaning that once you create a subscription, the promo code is only valid for new subscribers. If you're a subscriber already and you want to use another promo code, there's no way to do that. We don't have that option. So right now, obviously for you guys, and we're going to actually post this at the end of this video, at the end of this conference on social media as well, is the PA2021 promo code. This will give you a 25% discount, lowering the price down to, I think it's $48 and change, which is probably the lowest price you'll get for Mypabox. The only other time that it gets lower than that is on Cyber Monday, if I'm not mistaken, or it's Black Friday, one of those where we give a 30% discount. So, and we've been doing that consistently, and that's what we're gonna stick to. But right now there's a 25% discount if you guys wanna use it. It's gonna expire tomorrow, April 12th at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So you will not have this. Is only it's a time sensitive code. So utilize it if you guys feel like this is something that you guys want to use. I'm just gonna shed some light. We're gonna take a break in like 5 minutes. We're gonna take a 15-minute break, but not right now. If you guys want to kind of go do your thing, I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes to kind of like why you should use Mypabox. A lot of people, or other resources, or how you should go about applying to PA school in general. So the number one rule that I always say on any conference that we do, to pre-PA conferences, or when I speak to any pre-PA student, is figure out what PA school you want to go to, period. That is your primary goal when you're applying to PA school. You have to know what PA school or PA schools you're applying to. Once you know that, you have the foundation of what prerequisites, well, you should have the foundation of what prerequisites you need in order to get into that school. When I mean prerequisites, it doesn't mean necessarily courses. It's everything. It's how many hours do they need of patient care experience? Do they accept patient care or healthcare experience, which are two different things? Do they need some kind of community service? Do they have a time frame condition, like this class has to be taken within 5 years or 10 years? Do they have a minimum grade condition? This is what I mean when I say prereqs. I should rather say requirements. You have to know all of the school's requirements. You compile it all together, whether you guys want to use a notebook, whether you guys want to use an Excel sheet, whether you guys want to use Mypabox or other resources. Once you put all that together, that gives you a good pool of information of how you should navigate undergrad. And say you're in your third year of undergrad, you're in your junior year, and you're applying to PA school. You want to start PA school right when you finish senior year. You finish in May. You want to start around August, September. You need to apply in your roughly junior year for that, unless you're going to plan on taking a gap year. But understand that there's a lot of schools that do not allow you to have pending prerequisites when you're applying to them. There's plenty of schools that do, but there's plenty of schools that don't. So you have to know that distinguishing factor between those schools. So, because again, if you are having pending prereqs and you're applying to school that does not accept pending prerequisites, why are you applying there? So make sure you guys kind of navigate yourself from that regard. This is the reason why we've put together Mypabox. So you guys have an easier way of understanding all the different dynamics that come into the application cycle. So, and to your personal application. So keep all that in mind. The next factor that I suggest you guys use for applying to PA school, choosing schools, is tuition. A lot of people do not speak or do not stress tuition. What do I mean by that? If you get accepted, obviously this is simple, right? If you get accepted to a school that is $150,000 for the whole program versus $60,000, you would assume to go with the $60,000, right? That's what I would do. But some people have different circumstances where that $60,000 school may be across the country and they don't want to travel there. Number one, they don't want to leave their family, or other circumstances come into play. Maybe they have a family, they can't relocate, whatever the circumstances are. I'm not saying that is your make or break kind of, hey, I don't want to apply to this school. I'm just saying that if you do have an option to apply to a school that is cheaper, use that option. Why? It is not easy to pay back student loans, even though it is very easy to take student loans. I'll give you a very simple example. To go take a student loan is actually very simple. Go to any school, as long as you maintain a certain number of grades, certain threshold, the financial aid will keep allowing you to take loans, pretty much, as long as you have somebody that's going to vouch for you. Now, try to take a $100,000 loan, just as an example for your own sake, to understand how reality works when you graduate. Take that same $100,000 loan and say, hey, I want to use this for a business. Go to a bank and try to get a $100,000 loan. You're going to see how much documentation they're going to ask you before they say yes, and most likely they're going to say no to you. With that being said, the bank wants to make sure you're going to pay them the money back. The same thing in PA schools. But when you graduate with a license, you're probably going to be making good money to pay those loans back. But it will take you a long time to pay that back, regardless of how much money you're going to make. Even if you get a six-figure salary right away, you may have life expenses. You may want to have a car. You may want to buy a house. You may have kids. You may want to travel. You may want to do this, that, the other. So keep that as a second biggest factor, in my opinion, when you're applying to PA school. So I'm going to kind of cut with that, and we're going to get into more final thoughts after the break. If you guys have any questions, Again, keep posting them in the chat, and we'll try to get through many, if not all of them, at the end. Obviously, if we haven't addressed them throughout the meeting. So we'll talk to you guys in 15 minutes. Just stay on, and we'll just put ourselves on mute in the meantime. Okay, hello everyone. So the break is now over. Trina, Kristy, are you both on already?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. So
Yep.
ladies, you guys can take over and kind of get into the next topics.
Kristy, do you want to start or?
Yeah, sure. All right, so thanks everyone for joining. My name's Kristy Goodman. I am a faculty member at Southern California University of Health Sciences, and I'm also the chair of PA admissions. We also have Trina Cicinelli here, who's the MSPA admissions advisor. So she's the first one who sees every application that comes to our program. And so between the two of us, we've seen probably every mistake you can think of, every variation of application that you can think of, and we're here to try to help you learn some tips about what to do and what not to do. So the first thing we wanted to start with was professionalism. So at our school, professionalism is something we look for both in our applicants and our students. And so oftentimes I find that applicants think that emailing frequently shows interest to a program, right? Like, oh, if I email and I express my interest, then they'll remember my name. But at times, this can actually be seen as maybe overly persistent, right? So when you're emailing questions, especially ones that are very readily evident the answers are evident on the website, that's not something that shows positively, right? It tells us that you're not reading the website, you're not like looking for resources before you email us. And so when you're emailing a program a question, make sure that you've really looked at their website. You've looked at all the pages, you've looked at their FAQs, their admissions requirements, you've maybe gone to one of their virtual events, and this is still something that you can't find, right? We really appreciate great questions. We're here to help people, but I know I can speak for our program, and I'm sure many other programs, that when you're emailing questions that are really obvious on our website, not something that's appreciated. Also, people can be really overly persistent, bordering on harassment. And so I'm sure no one here would be like that, but we've definitely had applicants that are really pushy. Maybe we tell them that they don't meet a specific requirement or something, and they're really quite pushy with that. That is not something that reflects well on an applicant. And if you happen to have someone like Trina in your program who remembers names, she will remember your name, good or bad. Know the programs that you're applying to. So this is something that Jacob really spoke about earlier, but you need to understand what their minimum requirements are, what prerequisite courses they require, whether you can have those pending or not, what their minimum GPAs are, what kind of evaluations you need to have, because a lot of programs have these minimum requirements, which means there's no room for interpretation, right? Like if you're applying to a program like ours, for instance, that has a minimum GPA overall and core science prerequisite of 3.0, unfortunately, if your GPA is 2.99, there's no wiggle room for that. We have to stick with our published. So your application automatically be denied. And most schools are like that. So if you're applying, make sure you understand the requirements. Don't waste your money applying to schools that you don't meet the requirements for. As you saw, there's over 200 PA programs in the country. I can almost guarantee that regardless of where you land, there's some program that you do meet the requirements for. You just have to know what they are. And then also understand that PA programs often receive thousands of applications every year. So our program receives over 1,000 applications. Trina gets hundreds of emails every day, every week. And so, again, be gracious with your emails. Make sure that you're asking really good questions, that you really try to do the research on yourself. Don't expect a response within a day or two. Sometimes it can take several days to get back to people. And try to use other resources before emailing programs to ask questions.
I just wanted to add to that one quick comment on that too. So that means we don't want you to email the dean of the program, okay? Anything I'm saying is something I've experienced. We don't want you to email the president of the university just because I did not respond to your email within 24 hours. These are examples of unprofessional behavior, okay? I just wanted to reiterate that, but I know Kristy did good of sharing that, so thank you so much.
All right, so we want to go over a few application etiquette principles. So make sure that when you're applying to Caspa, you understand the deadlines for your programs and what they mean. So Caspa has 10 different deadlines that schools can choose from. As an example, ours is January 15th, but they range all the way from, within a few months of the application opening, all the way till April 1st of the next year. So just make sure that you understand what the application deadlines are for the different programs you're applying to and what that application deadline means. So Caspa has different statuses. They range from received, which means your application was submitted and received, but maybe your transcripts have not been received yet, so they haven't verified it. Complete and then verified. So a lot of schools, ours is one example of that, require verified applications by the application deadline. So every year we unfortunately have applicants who submit their application too late, where they might their application might have been received by Caspa by the deadline, but it was not verified. And that was where they spoke about earlier, Jacob spoke about earlier, that you should allow 4 weeks for your application to be verified. And that includes getting your transcripts to Caspa, having them verify your classes, etc. Make sure you check your email for updates. So we as a program communicate quite frequently with our students. So if there's something, or with our applicants, so if there's something that you're missing, as an example, maybe you're missing a prerequisite course, our school allows you to apply with missing prerequisites in progress, as long as you complete them by the application deadline. We'll send an email saying you have, met these requirements and you're missing these. And so make sure that you're checking your emails, check your junk email, because the school may go there. During the Caspa application cycle, check your emails, make sure that you keep your contact information on Caspa up to date. After you submit your application, you can actually change your number, your address, your email, etc. So if you're graduating, for instance, and maybe you don't have access to your school email anymore, make sure that you update it so that you get those invites. Most schools today are not sending out letters like back when I applied to PA school. They're contacting you via email. So you may miss really important notifications about missing requirements. You may miss interview or admissions offers if you're not checking your emails and your phone and your voicemails or whatnot. Again, make sure that you're adhering to the guidelines of each program, and don't be assertive in your emails or phone calls. Being pushy will get you nowhere. And I can speak for probably every program, I would say, okay? Pushy applicants are not really appreciated, because if you're someone who's pushy in the application process, you're probably going to be like that as a student, and most faculty don't want students like that. Also, keep in mind that you're applying to be a professional, right? So you have to be professional in your interactions starting from day one. We expect, as I mentioned, professionalism and the ability to read and listen from our applicants. So if you're not able to read the website and interpret, what's required of you, and you're emailing all the time or calling all the time, that's not a good look, right? As a PA, you have to be able to find information yourself, utilize your resources to find answers to your questions and whatnot. You can't just ask someone for it. So keep that in mind, that how you present yourself during the application cycle will carry through to you. Unfortunately, we've had applicants who are really quite aggressive in their applications. And when we see their application the next year, that may be someone that we're just not interested in interviewing because we remember that experience with them. So just keep in mind that the way that you present yourself can kind of carry through the years of your applying with you.
And I just wanted to add, Kristy, I look on the different websites and chat groups of pre-PAs. So we've actually had applicants that were interviewed, or maybe they received a notification that they were missing something, they didn't meet the minimum requirements, and then they were quite negative in their responses about the program. And it's not too hard to figure out who you are. So be aware that if I, as an admissions advisor, am checking like my PA forum, there's another one like I think Physician Assistant Chat. If I'm checking those, I'm sure other programs are checking them as well. And so you might want to be aware that just even your social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things are a reflection of who you are. And so being professional is beyond the application, beyond even the interactions that you have with the programs. It's really how you're showing yourself to the world. Okay, so I understand that, there's a lot of things going on, but being professional is, exactly like what we're saying in a whole. So what you're saying to others, all those things can be found out. You leave a, I guess, a social media history trail, and that can be found out. And so just be aware of that, that if I'm checking those things, I'm sure other programs are checking those things as well. Okay.
All right, so going on to the personal statement. So understand that, again, most PA programs receive hundreds or thousands of applications every cycle. And so, depending on how they process these applications, they may be reading hundreds or thousands of personal statements. And so make sure that when you're writing your personal statement, you're writing something that would catch someone's attention, right? Because surprisingly, a lot of personal statements end up looking very similar. People will talk about hardships that they've had and, why they were interested in the PA program. And while it might seem unique to you, a lot of times they're very similar to other applicants. But the ones that we really remember and stand out are the ones that speak to who you are as a person and that are very genuine. We don't want personal statements that are, very average, if I can say that. Adding humor, like in an appropriate way, can be a good way to stand out. Share something unexpected. We've had applicants who have shared about maybe personal medical issues that they've had. And of course, you don't have to share about that, but that's just an example that really, stick out to us. And I can think of people we've accepted that shared really personal stories about various aspects of their life in their personal statement. And I still remember those personal statements to this day. Also, always have one or more people read your personal statement. So when you're filling out Caspa, there's a lot of information that you're putting in, and you might look at your personal statement in your application a million times before you submit it. But it can be really easy to like overlook something, right? Like when you know what you're trying to say, you may very easily overlook some spelling error or something, that was written incorrectly. And so always ask someone, whether it's a parent or a friend or an advisor or a mentor or whoever, to read your personal statement, to look at your application. I'm really surprised sometimes by how many spelling and grammatical errors I see in applications. I actually remember one year when I was interviewing, about 50% of the applications I looked at, and these are people who made it to the interviews, had some kind of grammatical or punctuation error in their personal statement. And I was like, wow, I'm really surprised at the number of applicants who have this. So that tells me, that maybe you're not as detail oriented as we want you to be. So again, this speaks, you have very limited time to make an impression on an admissions member or committee or interviewer or whoever's reading your application. So make sure that's a good impression that you're leaving. So for the interviews, I want to say be prepared for your interview, but don't be so prepared that you're like reading off of a script when you're answering questions, right? So especially if you've been to PA interviews before, you may know that certain PA programs use the same question, year after year. You may have similar questions from different PA programs. And so be prepared in your response, but be genuine, right? So this year we did virtual interviews where we were on Zoom interviewing. And some of our admissions committee members said that they could tell that people were reading their responses. They could like see them like reading on the screen. So don't be that person, right? Don't be so prepared that you're reading your responses like verbatim. Research the program that you're interviewing. So one thing about Southern California University that's very unique is that we are the only PA program in the country that offers an integrative curriculum, which means that we have you teach alongside other students in the chiropractic and acupuncture and Chinese medicine professions. You rotate alongside them in some of your rotations. And this is something that makes SCU very unique. Okay. So we like to know that when you're interviewing at our program, you recognize that. Okay. We want to make sure that you're interested in integrative medicine. We want students who value other health professions and are interested in learning more about them. We don't want to be just one of, 20 programs that you applied to where you can't remember like where SCU is located or like why we're different than other programs. So make sure that you look at that. Also, make sure that the program's mission aligns with your own goals. So often the mission and vision statements are very clearly outlined. Program goals are outlined on PA websites. These are all required by the accrediting body, ARC-PA. And so you should be easily able to find this information on websites. make sure that you're not just applying to a school because it's close to your home, or maybe they have like easier requirements that you meet. You want to make sure that you're in a program that really aligns with the kind of PA that you want to be. So if you want to be a surgical PA, maybe that means applying to a program that's farther away from your home but focuses on surgery. If you want to be a PA who works in an underserved area, maybe that means applying to a PA program that has that in their mission statement, that focuses on the underserved. Maybe you're interested in integrative medicine, so you want to apply to a program like ours who has a focus on integrative medicine. So don't just apply to the PA programs that are local to you or that you meet the requirements for, and that's the only reason you're applying to them. Look at what makes that program unique. Look at what experience they offer their PA students, and make sure it aligns with the type of person and PA that you want to be. When you're interviewing, share who you are. I love when people just act like themselves, right? Obviously in a professional way, but you can very much show your personality. You can be funny. If you're reserved, that's fine, but show who you are. Tell us about your passions. I often speak with our committee members after they interview, and the things that stand out to them are always something that makes them unique. Maybe you were like a, piano prodigy when you were younger, or maybe you won a national spelling bee contest or something, or maybe you I don't know, grew up in a state that we don't see a lot of applicants from, right? Like Alaska or something like that. Those are the things that make us remember applicants, and when we're going through and choosing which applicants we want to accept, those are the things that we remember about them. So share who you are. And if you've made some mistakes in your life, share those too. Don't try to hide them. As was mentioned earlier, it is not uncommon to see where applicants hide misdemeanors or felonies or academic infractions, and eventually those do come out. And unfortunately, a lot of programs, ours included, will not allow someone to continue, whether that comes out during the admissions process, or whatnot, whether that comes out once they're already admitted to the program. There are certain things that are hard stops, and there are certain things that would not have been a hard stop, except for the fact that they lied about it. And we certainly, value honesty. And so I know a lot of programs are the same thing, the same way. It might not be a big deal if you've had a misdemeanor or something in the past, but if you lie about it and then we find out about it, that speaks to who you are as a person, right? So if you're dishonest about something like that, what else will you be dishonest about in the future? And so just be upfront. There are so many different programs in this country for PA school. Everyone has different perspectives on these things. Just because one program denies you because of something in your past, by no means means that someone else will. Sometimes it's a matter of how much time has passed. So one example of this is, certain convictions can possibly prevent you from getting placed at clinical sites. But if a certain amount of time has passed, let's say 5 or 7 years since that conviction, a lot of times they'll fall off your background check, or they won't be as big of a deal as a more recent one. And so if you've been denied because of that in the past, don't lie about it the next application cycle because you think that will get you further. Just be honest, and I am sure eventually there will be a program that will appreciate that honesty and take you for that.
And also, Kristy, we want to mention too that we've had some applicants or students in the past who unfortunately got bad advice from their attorney, and their attorney advised them to not mention it. And so please don't take the attorney's advice, because that has resulted in several students in the past that we've had to deny as a result, because they chose to not disclose, like Kristy mentioned, and then it was found out later, and it was by the advice of their attorney. So we just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, so there is a question, and I mentioned this because we get a lot of questions ourselves about this, oh, I have this infraction, will that prevent me from, being admitted to the program? There is a question on Caspa for anyone who has not applied prior that says, have you ever, I forget exactly how it's worded, but have you ever pled guilty or no contest, or been, found guilty or something for a misdemeanor or felony? And as Trina mentioned, we've had people whose attorneys actually told them, say no to that, even though you did plead guilty. And those are the kind of things where that's pretty much a hard stop for a lot of programs. If they find out that you lied about that question, again, something that might have not been a big deal suddenly becomes one. So make sure that you're reading those questions very carefully and answering honestly. If you have any concern that maybe you should answer yes, I would always side on the put it on there, own up to whatever it was. Don't try to make excuses for it. Give the facts and then tell how you've grown from that. Same thing goes for, maybe poor academic history. Maybe you didn't do super well as a freshman for whatever reason. That's not a deal breaker by any means, but don't gloss over it. Don't ignore it, right? Because we're probably going to notice that. We're probably going to see that you had a bunch of C's in your freshman transcript and that you got better. And we want to know why that happened. We've had people who have applied and said that they were diagnosed with cancer their freshman year. Of course, we're going to, give them graciousness when it comes to getting poor grades their freshman year when they explain that. But if they hadn't told us that, and again, you don't have to disclose medical issues, but if they hadn't told us that, that would have been something we would have had no idea about, right? And so maybe we would have looked at that application differently. So don't be afraid to demonstrate, hardships that you've had in the past that you feel comfortable disclosing, and then demonstrate how you've overcome them. Don't make excuses, but show how you've grown from that. Okay, so one thing that I want to talk about is the term holistic review. So a holistic review, from its true sense, means that a program does not typically have minimum requirements. They do this holistic review. So they look at every aspect of your application, your grades, your personal statement, maybe your socioeconomic background, etc. And they do what's called a holistic review, which means they're literally looking at your entire application to make their decisions. Every PA program has a different way of looking at applications. And so it's important to understand what is valued for each program at what part in the process. And so as an example, at our program, we weigh more heavily GPA and clinical experience in the beginning review of the application. Once we get to the interviews, then we do a holistic review where the interviewers are looking at every aspect of your application before you come to the interview. So if you can, again, attend like virtual events. A lot of people are having virtual events now, in-person events, whatever it is. A lot of programs have admissions events. Attend them and see if you're able to get an idea of what the program values at what part in the process. Not everyone will tell you that, although there are some mandates by ARC-PA, the accrediting body, that they show that programs do explain on their website what preferences they give. So for instance, if they give preference to a person with a certain background or GPA or whatnot, they have to list that on their website. And so you can actually get a lot of this information just, again, by doing a comprehensive website review. But just understand that some programs have very strict requirements. They have cutoffs. There's no wiggle room when it comes to that. And then some have more of a holistic review. If you're someone who has a lower GPA or a lower number of healthcare hours, you may want to look for programs that do more of a holistic review, right? Or that don't have high GPA requirements. As an example, we're a newer program, so we are in our 5th class right now, and our admissions criteria has changed over the years, but our admissions criteria was less strict when we were a brand new program than it is now. And so applicants were able to apply and be very successful in our program who maybe had lower GPAs or less clinical experience than they have now. So there are always programs out there that you can apply to. You just need to understand what their criteria are and how they really view applications. Okay, and then just to kind of end on, be resourceful. I've kind of mentioned this along the way already, but understand, of course, what a PA is, understand the profession. It never looks good if you come in and you don't have an idea of what a PA is. That's why so many programs require or recommend that you've shadowed or worked with a PA, because they really want you to understand what a PA does. So make sure you do your own research before you apply, and definitely before your interviews. Being resourceful is part of being any kind of healthcare provider, but specifically a PA. So as a PA, you often practice independently. You see your own patients, you make your own diagnosis, you order your own tests, etc. And so you won't always have someone to rely on to help you. This is the same thing. This is the same way you should approach your application. Make sure that you're looking at the Caspa resources. I'm surprised by how many people don't utilize the Caspa website. Caspa has a great help center for applicants that gives you so much information on how they calculate GPAs, how to classify your courses, where to put your patient care experience. They have videos and like FAQs that you can watch and read. And I can always tell when people haven't utilized those resources, because I'm like, you can find them right there. I actually put a link in the chat box that tells you all the information about GPA calculation from Caspa that you need to know. They even have an Excel sheet where you can populate your classes and it will give you your GPA. So make sure that you're being resourceful in your application. And as I mentioned, read the website, go to virtual sessions or campus events, connect with other pre-PAs. With Instagram and social media today, it's not difficult to find PA programs, Instagrams, or students who go to certain PA programs. I know in our school, we have several PA students who have public-facing Instagram accounts, and we've had several pre-PAs or PA applicants who have connected with them, and they tell us like, oh, I spoke with so-and-so, you know, I found her on Instagram, and that's totally fine. Like, utilize those resources if they're willing to help you.
Fantastic. Trina, would you like to give any advice from your end outside before we get into anything else?
Well, I just wanted to tag on what Kristy had mentioned about being resourceful. So, and she hit it pretty well, but like, just because I'm the admissions advisor and I am the one that receives, I'm the first line of communication that receives a lot of phone calls and emails. And literally, if you call me, it'll tell you that our program is a high demand program. And so therefore we can't answer the phone call. So I'll get a phone call that'll just say, hi, this is so-and-so, and please give me a call back. I have some questions about the admissions program, with no details. Or I'll get an email that'll say, I have a few questions, and there'll be 20 questions in that email. And I don't have time to answer 20 questions in an email when it's certainly available online. So yes. So just to reiterate, anything that we're giving you and guidelines, this is something that we're experiencing. And so we actually don't have to make any of this stuff up. It's just happening all the time, constantly, daily. So anyway, but yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us too.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
So as you guys know that, you know, when you guys signed up for this, you filled out a couple of questions about, you know, Caspa, PA box, interview process, personal statement, and just general questions. So we picked a couple of questions from each category that were very common. So how does Caspa, and some of this we actually talked about, so we'll skim through them pretty quick. So how does Caspa calculate GPA, which Kristy did put the link to the website. It's a very simple, it's a relatively simple formula, but it's, you know, you can find the link. They convert your letter grade. So for example, if you got an A, they'll convert that to a 4 with the attempted credits that you have. And then they divide that and they convert that into quality points. And it's a very simple formula. The reason for them doing that is that your college, for example, will, if you've retaken chemistry 1, say if you got a C+ first time and then you get an A, they will kind of give the grade forgiveness and take the A, right? Bumping your GPA up. But Caspa will calculate all that. So there's no grade forgiveness, for example. If you've gotten a C+, then you got an A, you're gonna get an average of that. And really what Caspa tries to do is equalize everyone's GPA, right? So because if I retook all my classes, I really messed up in the first 2 years, retook them all and got all A's, where Jacob has been working hard from the beginning and he's been doing good from the beginning, well, that kind of like shows that, or that should show the admissions committee as far as, you know, what they're doing. So I personally believe that's the reason why they did it. If any of you guys want to add anything to that question.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little insight. So basically what Sarjil just said is exactly it. Caspa is very simple in calculating GPA, even though a lot of people have like predominantly a lot of questions about Caspa. How do I know my GPA is accurate? How do I know my Mypabox's calculation of the GPA is accurate? So it's a very simple formula. It's on Caspa, exactly where, Sergio, do you want to find that link? Where do we have it out or no?
I do.
Where if you just go on Caspa, that link exists there. It literally tells you what the formula is. Exactly, it's right there.
They will convert your transcript grade into a numeric value. So B is this, C is this, and then the attempted credit. So if it was math, you got an A, which is 4, and it was 4 credit course, they'll multiply 4 by 4, giving you 16. They'll do that for all your courses, which will total 36. And so that 36 is your quality points. And then you attempted, this was total of 17, divided by 17, your Caspa GPA is this, right? So you guys can already see if you've retaken courses, say if I got, if this was math 1 and this is math as well, if I got a B, that's a 3, math is an A, that's a 4, that will play a factor into it. So retaking courses, especially of those that have retaken it, is going to play a factor in your undergrad GPA being different than your Caspa GPA.
It's not even retaking courses. It's also withdrawn.
Yeah, exactly.
Attempted credit. Like if you didn't get credit for a class that you withdrew, that also plays a role. So the idea here is undergrad. So there's different variations of why people ask about this question specifically. One is Caspa has an Excel sheet that you can go and enter all of your information in, and it will basically give you the GPA but basically of your overall GPA, not your science GPA, not your non-science GPA, not your prerequisite GPA. Mypabox does that for you. Why? Because we categorized all of the classes that is in our drop down of classes you can select from into a particular category based on Caspa's own schedule that they have for categorizing your courses. So we've taken that into account. This is why when you enter a course that you don't see from the drop menu, we specify and we ask you, what course is this? Is this a science course? Is it a non-science course? And we actually give you a link right there also to the Caspa site where specifically the categories exist and how to categorize it all.
Correct.
So even though some things may be a little ambiguous in terms of they still give you, because a lot of the names there are generic, they're not very specific course titles. And some students may have, hey, but this course, the way it's described on my transcript doesn't exist on the course list that they have here. So what do I do in that scenario? Casper goes over those scenarios for you. And they basically tell you, you should go by the department first. Actually, not the name first, and then the department if you still can't figure it out. Like meaning, what department is this course given by? That is where, it's, for instance, if it's given by biology department, it will probably fall into a biology course subject, which is a science course. So keep that all in mind when you guys are asking about the Casper GPA calculation.
Right.
And Mypabox is, I'm sorry, Sergeant, Mypabox is 100% accurate in terms of calculating your Casper GPA. The only discrepancies that you guys will ever find, if there are discrepancies, is the actual Casper GPA that you're going to get at the end when you submit your application, for a couple of reasons. If you or the people you may have used a service that they enter the transcript for you, by mistake, categorize a subject into a science versus a non-science, or vice versa, meaning a course that isn't a science course and you did categorize as a science course and it's a 4.0, and you caught that mistake, but on Mypabox you didn't do that, Mypabox will show you one GPA versus Casper will show you a different GPA. So that is the difference, the only difference that exists between our GPA calculation methods and the verified GPA calculation method.
Right. So what Jacob is trying to say is that it's really the course category. So remember, we talked about that when we were entering the course into Caspa. Each course that you enter in will need to be categorized. And this is basically the course subject list where you would have to go. And this is where Mypabox, we've already done the work for you, where we've linked your courses to one of these course categories. Now, one thing is Caspa can make an error with these courses. So you'll notice here in the Caspa FAQ question, if you don't agree with the GPA that Caspa calculates, so don't make it seem like it's a say all be all, because they can make an error as well, categorizing your course. You can dispute that GPA. So we have gotten emails saying that Mypabox calculated the Caspa GPA, their Caspa GPA, and Caspa then categorized it and their GPA was lower, and they've disputed it and won it. So that can happen where they can erroneously, associate a category difference. So keep that in mind. Always double check the summary that Caspa will give you, once they calculate your GPA. Any other feedback regarding that? Kristy, you have anything?
Yeah, I do just want to echo that we see quite a few mistakes with course classification, and I'm not sure if this happens on the applicant side when they're inputting it or if it's from the service. We are pretty attentive to specific classes because we have a GPA that takes in our core science classes, which are chemistry, microbiology, human anatomy, and human physiology. And so Trina and I have both caught several mistakes where, you know, physiology courses are categorized as psychology or something like that. And if you're someone who's right on the border for a GPA calculation, like let's say the minimum is 3.0 and you're right around that border when you're calculating it yourself, you absolutely want to make sure that they're being classified correctly, because this could be the difference between your application being denied because you end up with a 2.99 versus a 3.1 or something like that. So 100%, regardless of whether you pay for the service or you do it yourself, check to confirm that you're putting things in the appropriate category. Read the instructions on Caspa. What I did, what I applied is I actually got an unofficial transcript copy for myself from my school, so I knew exactly how they classified the courses that I was taking. And then I, you know, compared that with Caspa, because in some cases, just as an example, a biology course or a microbiology course maybe have taken in the biology department, but because Caspa gets more specific with their classification, you'd want to put that as a microbiology course instead of biology or whatnot. So that's just one example, but definitely double check. Another thing that can be helpful if you're borderline for GPAs is to submit your application and see what your GPA is calculated by Caspa before you submit to a bunch of other schools. So maybe submit to one school and then double check that you are above that 3.0 or whatever GPA you're looking for, and then you can submit to additional schools.
That's a very good tip.
That's a very good tip. I haven't heard that so far.
There was a couple of questions about pass-fail in the chat about the calculation for GPA. So just to be clear, Caspa is not going to calculate a pass-fail grade. So even for SCU, especially with COVID, we are currently accepting pass-fail to meet some of those requirements. So there's no way to calculate that into a grade. And also this cycle, and Kristy can clarify this, but we're actually going to be requesting syllabuses and maybe information from the course catalog because, you know, we don't want to assume, but, you know, if you're getting an A, you want to get that A letter grade, right? But if it's a pass fail and you have the option and you're getting like you're squeaking by with a C, then you may want to just do pass fail so you don't pull down your GPA. So any pass fail grades will not be calculated into GPA. So, and you need to check to make sure which programs accept pass fail. And you also need to make sure you have the GPA that's required, regardless of what those pass fail grades are. I don't know if Kristy wants to tag on anything else with that.
I think the last thing I would say is just know that you can update in progress course grades on Caspa after you've submitted, but those are not calculated into your Caspa GPAs. And so again, if you're someone who's borderline or you know that you're retaking classes to improve your GPA, submitting prior to having those classes completed and your grade entered into Caspa is not going to be helpful because you're going to get A's hopefully in those classes, but your Caspa GPA will have already been calculated and it won't be recalculated once you enter those grades. So that's just something to be aware of as well.
Okay. Next question, does Caspa calculate expired class that were taken too long ago?
Yes.
So yeah, exactly. Bottom line is yes. So if because you have to enter your transcript exactly the way it is, no matter when. So if I went to college 10 years ago, I would have to enter those classes in and those will count, even though the school is not going to accept them. That will play a factor.
So I'm just going to shed a little light on this because I know it's some people may kind of, so there's schools that have a minimum requirement, 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, whatever that requirement may be. Caspa is still going to count those courses like you guys just answered. Even though it may sound unfair, I kind of feel that's unfair if that school doesn't look at it. Why is Caspa calculating it into my GPA? But that just is what it is. I hope you guys can understand that. The point of this whole meeting is to make you guys aware of the information. It's not about, are you sensitive about the information? It's unfair. Like if I was a student, it would be unfair. If I took these courses 15 years ago, but I have to retake them all and I did poorly then, and I'm a lot more mature today academically, why are those grades still factoring in when those schools don't accept them? Because honestly, there are schools that do still accept them. There's plenty of schools that do not have a minimum time frame requirement. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say about that is this is something that you may not know about Caspa unless you on the admission side. There is an option for schools to utilize what's called a local GPA, which essentially means a custom GPA. And so what this does is, as a program, you can select which courses from a list of generic courses, like, again, biology, chemistry, whatever. As a program, you can set these parameters and say, Caspa, I want you to calculate a custom GPA for our program that includes these courses. And you can actually set parameters on how far back they go. So as an example, we use this in our school. We call it a core science prerequisite GPA. We only calculate, or Caspa calculates it for us, but it only pulls in courses that are classified as chemistry, microbiology, anatomy, and physiology. And we set a 7-year parameter on that because we only accept science classes within the last 7 years. This is one of the reasons why it's really important to carefully read schools' websites, because I find that a lot of our applicants assume that we are looking at the science GPA. The science GPA is very different from our core science prerequisite GPA, which is also very different from the BCP GPA that Caspa calculates. So don't just assume that every school is looking at your overall and your science. That's absolutely not true. We've done audits of the schools around us in our area, and I can tell you that they all have different science GPAs that they're looking at. It's not always the overall science GPA. So something to keep in mind when you are, looking at program requirements, that schools can do a custom calculation.
Absolutely. And there are some schools that will look at your last 60 credits or your last 45, last 45 science credits, things like that. So that's a very good point. Is that information, do the schools have to make it public, Kristy? Like if they are looking at specific?
They do, yeah. So if you see a GPA that, again, you should read Caspa's information because it will tell you all the GPAs they automatically calculate, and there's a lot of them. But like on our program website, for instance, we say what it is, and then we kind of have an asterisk and we explain what that GPA means and where it comes from.
Awesome. Okay, perfect.
But many schools don't do that, unfortunately. Even though it may be a requirement, they're not good at making that information visible.
That's true.
It's somewhere there, but it may not be staring right at you. So this is the point of being meticulous in knowing this information. This is what we keep stressing. So I hope all you guys kind of take that away, is be meticulous about the schools that you're really interested in applying to.
Absolutely. So the next question was, if I apply to Caspa for schools with a January start date, like for example, Southern California, I don't get into any of those schools I applied to. Can I still go back and send out applications to schools that are still open for the same application cycle? So my answer is yes. Just like how Kristy said, submit your one application if you want to see what your GPA might be. You can always submit to other programs as long as they their application deadline hasn't passed.
Now, do I agree with doing this? Probably not, in my opinion, because you're applying really late in the cycle.
Well, I would say if a school is rolling admissions, then yes, that probably might not be favorable, but
if it's rolling admission, you should not apply to that school, period. That would be very, very, no, meaning like if the cycle opens up in May 1st, like April 29th, and they have rolling admission, and their deadline is January 15th, for instance, and you applied to everyone, you didn't get in. Now you're looking at schools that had rolling admission also, and their criteria may be in February and March, their deadline, which is very rare. But again, if that is the scenario and they have rolling admission, you probably don't have a seat in that school. All the seats are already taken.
So the reason I would disagree with that is there's a chance, like your likelihood of getting acceptance that, yes, I agree with you, is probably low, but there is a chance that you might get in, because if you could be put on a wait list, or someone, if someone decides not to accept you were gonna say
let me just interject, guys, because this is my 4th admission cycle that we're going to be starting here. And I will tell you, SCU, the last 3 years in a row, have gotten applications on our deadline date. They were highly qualified applicants. They ended up getting an interview, and some of them got a seat. So that's not necessarily the case, because if I could use an analogy, way back when you were in high school, if you had a really high GPA or you had a lot of AP or IB classes and you did really well on your SAT, you didn't wait for the deadline, right? You did an early application, right? But what if you, again, didn't get into the schools that you wanted to get into? I mean, there's more criteria a lot of times than just that. And so we at SCU for the last 3 years in a row, we've had people that apply right up on the deadline date. And since their application on Caspa was already verified, they usually already had all of the minimum requirements and everything, and they've gotten interviews and they've gotten an offer. And so, when Kristy was helping me this cycle, I let her know that that's happened every year. So, because since we're one of the last deadline dates in January, it's just us and one other program locally. Most of the other programs in our area, their deadline dates already passed in the fall.
Mhm.
And so, so that isn't necessarily the case. So it just depends on how your cycle goes and where you get interviews. But also if you have a program that you really want to get into and you know their deadline date is not until January or February or whenever it is, you may be offered a seat in another program, but you may want to hold out and wait to see if you get interviewed there. So it just depends on where you really want to go,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Put up the good side until the end of the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking a chance there for sure, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get it.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. So another common question that was in that sheet was, what is the best way to write out your experiences, paragraphs or bullets? I'll kind of go first on that. It really doesn't matter. As long as, you are listing out your descriptions, it's up to your preference. Reason being because, the program has to verify or Caspa has to verify whether it's patient care experience or healthcare experience. So whether you were, directly involved in the patient's care. So as long as you can communicate that in some way, shape, or form, bullet form or paragraph, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you guys have any opinion on that.
No.
I would just say that when you're writing those experiences, so like, let's say you applied last cycle and you didn't get in a program, and you guys have talked about transferring your application from one cycle to the next. Just be aware that if your healthcare hours, if you put it in through, like, let's say September, and it doesn't have an end date. So once your application is verified, Caspa is going to have a total amount of hours. They're not going to keep generating those hours. So this goes along the lines of when you apply and submit. So you can actually enter a new experience under those dates to give you more additional hours in that experience, even after your application has been verified. So you definitely want to be detailed in whatever your experience is. Don't just assume that who's ever evaluating your application, that they know what you're doing as a medical assistant. That is a wide open field, or even as a behavior technician, I'm sorry, there's all different kinds, but just don't assume that we know what you're doing. Literally list out every single thing that you're doing, because in our application review, our PA faculty are reviewing those experiences, those descriptions. They're not just looking at the quantity of hours, they're looking at where it is. Are you in a hospital? Are you in a doctor's office? Are you in an urgent care facility? Where are you? What are you doing? And all of those criteria is being scored. So just don't take that lightly, I guess is what I want to say.
Got it. But they don't prefer whether it's bullet point or paragraph, correct, Trina? Like
that doesn't matter, I don't think, just as long as you're getting all the information. And then, if you say that you're doing, for example, venipuncture, and you're in a job that doesn't require that, then that's when the PA faculty is going to send you an email and say, can you please give us more detail, because that experience, you're not supposed to be doing that. So we do have that. Like, sometimes we ask for clarification.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
If someone were to be a behavior technician, would those hours be acceptable?
So SCU does accept behavior technician, but that also is a wide range of experience. So you would need to be detailed. As far as other programs, I'm not really sure. I know that some programs don't accept some experiences, but at SCU we do, because that is obviously one-on-one patient care, but you do need to be detailed with everything that you're doing within that role.
Got it. Perfect. So somebody asked, how early should you start filling out your application filling out your application?
I think that depends on what kind of an applicant you are. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, some of the applications, I'm the first one that's looking at your application at our school. And I've seen applicants that have 20 years of healthcare experience, 20 years. I mean, thousands of hours, right? And their GPA is pretty good. And they retook their science classes because obviously they finished their degree years ago, because we do have older applicants at our school as well. And so someone like that, if they have their clinical experience tied up in a bow and they've got a pretty good GPA and they have good letters of recommendation, apply early. But if you're someone that's finishing a prerequisite course and that's not going to be done until the fall or the summer, remember what Kristy and Jacob and how do you say your name, sir? Yeah, thank you. That class is not going to be calculated in your GPA. And if you're wanting that to be calculated, then you would want to wait. So as you can see, there's so many different situations. So unless you have all the criteria of the schools you want to apply to and you think you're a pretty competitive candidate, then I wouldn't apply right away. I would wait because, you might be getting more hours. You may be taking additional classes, but if you think you're a very competitive applicant, then apply early. And again, remember the rolling admissions. But if you're not that competitive or you're unsure, then, you have time. I mean, for most programs, I don't think the application deadlines are hitting for a few months or longer. So there's really no urgency to do it the first day the application cycle opens.
Yeah, the good thing about Caspa is that you can start entering information and save it though. So it's certainly by no means too early to start entering it. We have lots of applicants who are like ready to submit on the first day. And like Trina said, there's pros and cons of that. But you can, like, if you're not going to apply, let's say till July or something, there's no reason you can't enter all of your courses, enter all of your hours, and then just wait to submit and update, whatever it is you need to update beforehand. Start working on your statement. You can work on it for months before you actually submit.
Absolutely. All right, so the next question we had was, can I specify which evaluations are to be used for each school I'm applying to? So basically, as you guys saw when we were filling out Caspa, when you add in your evaluation request, that's the title of the person writing your evaluation will just be there, but all the programs will get those letter recommendations. You can't pick and choose which programs will get what, correct, Kristy and Trina?
That's correct. Your evaluations are for all programs. So there's a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5, and every program that you submit to will see those. So that's where, if you're applying to multiple programs that have certain preferences or requirements, you really need to be careful about who you're asking for your evaluations. If you're applying to one program that requires a PA and one that requires a professor and one that requires a supervisor, right there, you already have 3 that you submit. So that is where it's helpful to know in advance which programs you're going to be applying to. You can certainly add on other programs later on, but you really benefit from knowing up front because, at certain parts of the application, you can't add anything. Now, the evaluations, I believe you can add another evaluation on after you submit, I think, because we have had people who like their letter of recommendation never came through for someone and they add another one. So I do believe that you can add that after you submit your application. But again, you only have a maximum of 5, so you can only add so many.
Perfect. So the next question is there a way to get a discount on Caspa fees if unemployed? So there is a Caspa fee waiver, I believe it's called. I think it's in their FAQ section. Where that might go. Yeah, it's right here. If you guys go to the FAQ, click over here, it talks about the Caspa fee waivers. So that is there.
So that is also a limited amount. It's not an unlimited amount. So keep that in mind. So you guys, if you're applying late in the cycle, that may be unavailable to you at that point. So it's kind of time sensitive. but they give you more of the detail on there. It's just they have a limited amount of how many waivers they give out per cycle.
Yeah. Next question. How do I know if the paid transcript input is done correctly in a timely manner?
Or in a timely manner, like slashing it. Okay.
So what we've been told from Caspa is that when your official transcript arrives, that you get a notification. So let's say you submit and then you're waiting for those official transcripts to come in. You're getting communication from Caspa the whole entire time. So, you know, I always have those applicants who's waiting on that last transcript. And sometimes they finish that class in May and now it's November and that official transcript never showed up. And so if you don't get a notification from Caspa saying that all of the transcripts that you've requested have been on your application, then more than likely your application is not verified and more than likely your application has not moved forward, unless it's just 1 or 2 pending prerequisite courses that you're completing or finishing. So, but I have seen Caspa verify applications with maybe even only 1 transcript, which is crazy, especially if you have 2 or 3 transcripts on your application. So that's why, as Kristy mentioned and Jacob, they all mentioned, it's really important to be up on your emails and checking because it could go to junk mail, and making sure that whatever information you're expecting to show up, whether it's a letter of recommendation, another transcript, any of those things, that you're going to get those updates from Caspa. And if you're not getting them, then you need to reach out to them and figure out what's going on. And don't wait too long for that. You don't want to miss a deadline of a program that you want to get into or that you're applying to.
Yeah, perfect. So next question is, can I start my application on Caspa if I'm not applying this cycle? If yes, what carries over to the next cycle? So I think we kind of already discussed that. You know, everything besides your letter of recommendations or your evaluations and your personal statement should get carried over. Does it all the time for everyone? No. So it should not be your primary source of keeping all your information and storing all this. But you can start you can start your application anytime you want.
I just wanted to share really quick. This is a real life example. So we had an applicant this last cycle. He emailed me, I think, in August, and he said, Trina, I interviewed for your program in 2018 and 2000.
Oh, I think
she got cut off.
Oh, and that was a good story too. I was waiting for you.
Yeah. Chris, do you know that story by any chance?
Don't know that story or I'd pick up.
All right, so we'll hold off. I guess we can just move on and she'll, is she on or did she get disconnected?
She's frozen.
Oh, maybe.
You know, it's kicking me off earlier too, so it might just be that Zoom is being wonky.
Okay.
It's all right. So we'll just move on. We'll come back to that story. Just remember the question.
Jacob, if you want to shoot her a text, so this way she kind of knows. All right. So the next question are questions about Mypabox. So at what stage of my application process can I best utilize Mypabox? The earlier, like as we guys showed you throughout this whole presentation, the earlier you start organizing and earlier you start kind of coming up with an action plan of how, you know, whether you need PA shadowing, you need to take the GRE or the Casper, or, you know, what prerequisites you need to take, the better of a game plan you'll have and the better of an action plan you'll have. And you really will maximize your chances of getting accepted in the previous cycle. Just like with anything else, right? Like majority of the hard work is in preparation. Like prepare yourself to succeed and to really make sure you know what the requirements are. And obviously they can change cycle to cycle. And really stay on top of it. And that's what really what Mypabox is there to help you to do. Jacob, if you want to add anything on that.
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
At any stage you want to kind of, you know, if you feel like you want to go down the PA route, that's when you should start organizing on Mypabox at least.
For sure. So the next question was, how often are the school requirements updated?
So I'm the guy that updates all the schools. So typically, we update all the schools from around mid-February to right before when the Caspa cycle opens up. The reason why that is because I literally have to go on each website and troll each website, make sure that all the information is up to date, compare them, contrast them, change it, and update them. So I'll give you guys one example with Kristy. We spoke, I think, 3 times, and in the past like 3 weeks, just to make sure all their information is up to date. One of the things that we're doing to make sure our information stays up to date once it's updated is build a relationship with schools where if they decide to update something, that they let Mypabox know, and we update that information on the site as well. The second avenue of how we're trying to maintain the information once it's updated officially is through the report button that we discussed earlier. The more people that interact with Mypabox, with myself or Sergio through social media, whatever it is, the better it is, the more reliable the source is, meaning it stays up to date. I can't oversee 320 or 310 schools that exist right now in one shot. It takes time. It takes about, for me, because I feel like I'm an expert in going over each school and picking out that detail, because I really don't know anybody else that can review, that has reviewed all the schools in the country multiple times. I've done that several times since we started Mypabox back in 2018. And since then, I review the schools quite often, but it requires me at least 15 to 20 minutes per school. And mind you, there's 310 programs in the country. It's time-consuming task, but we do it. So it does get updated from mid-February to April, and throughout the year through the interactions we have with our users.
Absolutely. So how does Mypabox help with Caspa applications? I'm sure you guys saw during the presentation of how it can help you organize. Like the way I like to put it is that we are the Uber, right? I'm from New York City, so Jacob, I remember the time before Uber, we had to stand there and, hail a cab down and things like that. So both things will get you to your destination, which is into PA school, whether you use an Excel sheet or whether you use Mypabox. But Mypabox is just the Uber of applying to PA school, right? Like we just kind of help you organize, keep track of everything. And that really is the value that Mypabox brings.
So that's a good analogy. I'll give you guys a different analogy, maybe one that makes it a little more vivid for you. So the way you're going to apply to PA school right now is like using a roadmap, paper roadmap. Okay, you have to do your research. If you're going to go travel to California from New York, you have to find out that road. Make sure you stay on that road on the on the way there. What if or something, you don't get that information, right? However, with Pabox, we're not a map anymore. We're a navigation system. We're like Waze for you. We'll navigate you to your destination in a much simpler way. So this is the idea behind Mypabox. You can still do this all on your own, but why spend the time and the effort when the cost of it is very minimal? We made sure that it's minimal.
Yeah, like if it's $65 for the year, if you drink 1 cup of Starbucks coffee a month, you can definitely afford Mypabox. How accurate are the GPA calculations? Again, we touched on this. We took the same formula that Caspa uses, and that's how the algorithm works in Mypabox to calculate it. Again, the only difference is going to be how the courses are categorized and how Caspa might categorize it. And Jacob talked about that in the...
Mathematically, it does the same exact calculation. The point is how you distinguish your courses. That's the only difference.
Yeah. Next question, is there a way to transfer information from Mypabox directly into the Caspa? Currently, there is not. We are working on version 2.0. And eventually we will be approaching Caspa and seeing if they would like to integrate this system into where you could click a button and all your information automatically gets uploaded. But let's see if they want to play ball with, 2 PAs that are that are running this startup. But we'll see if they find value in that. But currently there's not. But one thing I'd point out, whether you use Mypabox or not, whether you use an Excel sheet or a notebook or a Word document, however you organize, you're still going to have to input all that information in there, right? So why not get the added benefit of having a requirement checker and letting you know once you're ready to apply to a school, or if you're not because you didn't meet the requirements, which the Excel sheet is not telling you, right? So even though it doesn't allow you to directly submit it, but there's still value that obviously you guys see in Mypabox. Next question, does Mypabox help connect and network with other pre-PAs? that is, again, something that we're going to be probably not in 2.0, it's going to be in 3.0, but we want to create Mypabox into more of a social media type platform or a LinkedIn specifically for pre-PAs and PAs to communicate and network and message each other, just the way that, the amazing thing about this conference, on top of all this information, having Kristy and Trina here, is how you guys are helping each other out in the chat and answering a lot of those questions. That, the power of communication and knowledge that can be shared through a network platform like Mypabox, that's something we definitely want to explore in the future.
Exactly. But before you move on that question,
Yep.
to answer this question specifically, yes, you can connect and network with other PAs. You can also speak to programs that are working with us. There's a distinguishing factor of how you can tell if a school is working with us and a school is not working with us. It's very, very simple. If they have an FAQ section available on Mypabox, that school is working with us. So that's one way that you guys can kind of figure that out. And with like Southern California, for instance, they're going to be sending their FAQs to us shortly. They're just in the process of updating it all before they send it to us so we can make it official. But they are working with us. We've been actually in contact for a little more than 6 months now, but we just haven't made it official with their FAQs yet. But another thing, we do have a message board on Mypabox for each individual school, which is a way that you guys can network either with the school or connect with the school if they're the ones monitoring that chat, or with other students that are using Mypabox. And remember, the message board is free. You do not have to have a subscription to Mypabox to use the message board. You just need to create an account and you can interact with anyone that really basically uses that message board.
Yeah, if you guys get into Southern California, for example, and you're looking for roommates, use the message board to ask other people that have been accepted.
Actually, a great strategy.
Yeah. How to get the cheapest deal on Mypabox? Use the code that we went over, PA 2021. You get a 25% discount, and that's active until tomorrow. How can we become affiliates? So a lot of students, they message DM us that, hey, I wish we had this instead of making all this Excel sheets and all that stuff. There's a form on our website, join our team. If you fill that form out, Jacob or myself will contact you, and then we'll get the process started.
Basically, that form, let me just elaborate where it is, because I know I'm going to get a bunch of DMs or something like that afterwards. So that form is literally on the homepage. It's on the right lower hand corner called Join Our Team. So, and we can discuss the affiliates and how they work with us individually, even though it's all the same thing. I just don't want to waste any of this time kind of elaborating on that. But yes, you guys can all become affiliates to Mypabox. The idea is to spread the word about it to those that are in need or are in this situation of trying to get into PA school and need guidance.
Yeah. Next question. Now we get to the fun stuff. How can I make my personal statement stand out?
This was the most common question asked from the 700 people that filled out the questionnaire with us.
So I'll let Trina and Kristy take over this one.
Well, I think it's what we kind of touched on earlier. Your personal statement should definitely be within the title, something personal about you, something that shows your personality. Like Kristy mentioned before, SCU gets thousands of applications every cycle. And so, unfortunately, not that I want to diminish this experience, but there's always someone with a sick relative or, and like she said, it all kind of sounds the same, especially if you're reading them hours at a time, which I have done. So you do want to just show something that makes you stand out amongst other applicants. Maybe like she had said before, maybe you were a piano prodigy. Maybe you won some type of a contest or an essay, or, you're some kind of an athlete, or you were in the military, or I'm just giving some examples of something that might be different compared to other applicants. And like she said, maybe you have an out-of-state experience. Our school is located in Southern California, so we get a lot of applicants from Southern California and from California. So with that being in mind, that could be the same for a lot of the other programs. Kristy, is there anything you want to add?
I think that touches on most of it. I was just trying to think if there isn't. No, I would say that's probably good. One thing to keep in mind is that there is actually a question. It's not just a personal statement, but you have to answer a question on Caspa, and I think it says what made you interested in becoming a PA or something like that. And so make sure that you are actually relating it back to the question. There is a little bit of guidance on what you should be writing about. So if you're preparing your personal statement beforehand, again, you can go on Caspa and you should be able to see what exactly it asks, but relate it back to that question. Don't go so far off on a tangent that it has nothing to do with what's being asked.
Absolutely. All right, so next question. Is it important to discuss poor GPA reasons or wait until the interview?
Well, there is a question, I think, on the Caspa application that asks you if you've had any academic infractions. So I know a lot of schools, if you've had a tough semester or a tough quarter, you would have to answer yes to that question, because sometimes you're put on probation or you're put on, some type of situation because of your poor grades. So I think within that question, you have to give like a brief statement as to why. So I don't know if you have to put in your personal statement unless it has to do with the whole reason why you want to be a PA or whatever. But there is a question on the Caspa application that asks you if you've had any academic infractions. And a lot of schools, if you're not doing well, you're put in that situation anyway.
So you could kind of leave it out from the personal statement is what I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, you can, because I mean, obviously you want to answer yes if you had a rough semester, because we're going to see your transcript anyway, and we're going to wonder why. So I think just as a general comment, since all the programs are reviewing your application, if there's any information on there that is leaving the program with a question, you want to make sure that question is answered on your application somewhere along the line. Okay. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's better if we don't have to ask you for the details, if you give us the details ahead of time. So for this question, there is a question if you've had any academic infractions, other questions about, if you had a misdemeanor or if you had a license taken away, like maybe you were a licensed, clinician and that was taken away for whatever reason. So there are questions on the application, and then they ask for a brief explanation what happened. Okay. So that's already in the application.
Gotcha. Next question. How much is humor appreciated in a personal statement? Should it be avoided at all costs? That's often where I shine my writing, but not sure it would be appropriate in this circumstance. So I think Kristy talked about that.
Yeah, humor, I mean, again, every school is different, right? So like, look at the mission statements. I'm pretty sure that SCU's mission statement actually talks about humor. We are a school that values balance and humor and fun, and that's actually in our SCU, not in the PA program specifically, but in the university's mission or vision statement. So like, yeah, we value humor, right? Maybe not all programs value that, but if you're someone who knows that they want to like be in a program where you can have fun and like, be funny or whatever, then again, look for programs that like have that value. There's of course a way to do it that's professional, right? To have humor that is unprofessional. And so if you are thinking that something's borderline, I would say leave that out. But if you know that you come across as your best self when you're being funny, then certainly be funny, right? Because you also, if a program doesn't appreciate that, then maybe that's not the program you want to go to anyways.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So should I address my application weaknesses in my personal statement?
Again, it depends. Yeah. Yeah, it really depends.
We kind of addressed that.
Yeah, I think Trina covered that in the previous question. There's a section for it as long as it's made aware to the program. Things to avoid in your personal statement. What should you absolutely avoid? What makes you guys cringe when you see this in a personal statement?
Spelling errors.
So, yeah, I would say spelling, grammatical errors, and then I also would say if, like Kristy said, if you go off on a tangent that has nothing to do with what you started. Ooh, like there's no flow in the way it's written. Okay. And you spend so much time on something that you started here and then you went way over there, and we're confused why we went from here to there. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And brevity is appreciated. You don't have to use all of the characters that you have available, right? So part of being professional and being in like higher education is being able to get your point across with fewer words. So don't feel like you have to fill the whole space up just because it's there. If you can get your point across and say what you want to say in a concise way, and you don't use all 5,000 characters or whatever it is, that's fine too. So don't feel like you need to just like belabor your points just to fill up space.
Good point. Because that's another common question that we get asked a lot in our DMs. How would I be able to tell schools that I've already applied to that? I am sorry, we've like literally copied and pasted this. So how would I be able to tell schools that I've already applied to that I am a reapplicant versus the schools that I haven't applied to yet?
I think the question to ask yourself is if that's important. So if you think it's important for them to know that you're a reapplicant, then you could maybe put it in your personal statement. Some programs will have custom questions that you have to fill out in order to apply to that program. And sometimes they'll ask you this, but it's actually not super obvious when someone's a reapplicant. So unless we happen to remember your name from an application or an interview, there's no way to know when you're looking at Caspa applications on the back end that someone's a reapplicant. That's not a question that they ask across the board. So I think that that's something you can definitely demonstrate in your interview if you want them to know that you applied and you've improved, X amount since then, and that's the reason that they should choose you this year. Then that's something you can definitely bring out in your personal statement or your interview. But I would definitely ask yourself, is that something that I want to showcase that I'm a reapplicant?
Got it.
Which it may be, but if it's not, then I wouldn't necessarily find a way to put that on there just to put that on there.
Perfect. Okay. So how has COVID impacted what admission committees would like to see on the personal statement?
I would say it probably has not impacted that at all. There is a COVID question that's optional on Caspa. It asks how COVID has impacted your like academic career and or experiences. It's optional. You can certainly answer that. I can't speak for any other programs. That's something that we look at when we're looking at interview candidates. But it wouldn't necessarily say that it's going to impact how they look at your personal statement specifically. There are some programs that are being more lenient in certain requirements, or maybe they've changed their requirements. Maybe they're accepting pass-fail or online classes now. Maybe they've decreased their requirements for hours or shadowing or whatnot. So again, just look on their website and see if they have like a specification for that.
Can I ask in terms of that? So you just said that is an option. Obviously, I understand that it's optional, but is it frowned upon not to answer that? So for instance, you said you do look at it, you do weigh that. But if I decide, for instance, if I was a student, I don't want to write an extra essay or explain myself because of COVID, say it didn't impact me as much as maybe somebody else that really wants to explain that scenario. Would you look at that as a negative for them not exercising that option, even though it's optional?
No, not at all. And honestly, if it hasn't affected you in any way, then I would say don't answer it, because that's, again, you're like trying to make something up that doesn't exist. So if it has not negatively affected you, you don't feel like there's anything that like important that you can say, then don't answer it. It's optional for that reason.
So another question regarding that, Kristy, is that say the only way it affected me was that my courses are now online. Do you want to hear that or not really?
You
No.
could certainly say that. I don't know, Trina, I would say maybe. No?
No,
Everybody's probably gonna say that.
you don't need that.
Okay.
Unless it was something that affected you being able to get the classes to fulfill the minimum requirements.
Okay.
But because one thing that we did get a lot of this last cycle was a lot of the junior colleges out here in California were not offering online labs. So they would take one of the science classes, but then they had to pay for the online lab through one of those online companies that, you could just do the lab with. So unless it was some situation like that where they were unable to fulfill the requirement, and this is why, fine. But I mean, really, you don't want to fluff your application. You want it to be straight to the point as much as possible. I would say the only place you want to fluff is the experience clinical hours descriptions. You want to be very detailed with that and make sure that you have everything that you do in the scope of your job, but realize that physician assistant faculty members are the ones reading it. So if you don't write it correctly, or if you say that you're doing something that you're not really allowed to do within the scope of that job, then they're going to question you. So, but that's really the only place I would add more detail. You really want it to be to the point, because again, like I said, we get over 1,200 applications every cycle, and one year we got almost 1,900.
Oh, wow.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we only have 50 seats, and we're only interviewing 200. So we have to, so anyway.
Gotcha. Understood. So next question, how do I know that my personal statement will be good enough to submit? So that's actually the reason I picked that question. The reason for that is, at what point do you know that you're done? It's ready. It's good.
Oh, that's a good question. I think this is where having someone else read it really comes into play, right? So obviously you want to make sure that you're answering the question, come up with whatever kind of avenue that you want to take to answer that question. Find something that makes you stand out if you can, and then have someone else read it and ask them, like, what would you think if you read this? Would it stand out to you? Does this seem like it makes sense? Like, I'm answering the question, have someone else read it. You don't want to get caught up on this. People put so much effort into the personal statement. Like, I see them do, like paid services for reviews and whatnot. And depending on the school, maybe the personal statement is really important, but it's one aspect of so many other things that we look at in the application. I can't think of a single time where a personal statement has been a make or break situation for someone. Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, we're just speaking for our program. I can't speak for everyone, but I would find it to be very unusual that the personal statement is what, gets you an interview or doesn't when you're looking at your entire application. So spend time on it, make sure you don't have any errors in it, have someone proofread it, put thought into it, but don't like stress over it so much that you delay submitting your application for a month or something because of that.
Got it.
Can I intervene on that one for 1 second in terms of like what you just said doesn't make it or break it? So we have a personal statement person that works with us that reviews personal statements if someone needs that aspect. And trust me, we have seen some pretty poor personal statements. And the point of that is, and I didn't really think that exists, because I don't consider myself a good writer nor a good reader, but when it comes down to writing something, it takes me a long time to put my idea on paper. But when I'm done with it, I think it's actually very good. With others, like I've seen some really bad personal statements. And mind you, we've only been doing this for 3 months. And those people really do need help in terms of grammatical guidance, in terms of flow guidance. So once that kind of, you see that's when you realize, wow, if I would have seen this, you probably would put that application aside. Versus if they did have some professional help, maybe for them, as they're reading it, they don't see their mistakes. Even though they have somebody else read it, it also depends on, is that person reading it qualified to read it?
Yeah.
So if they're not qualified to read it because of your lack of ability to choose somebody that knows what they're talking about, then you're going to get a bad review on your personal statement as well. Again, just like it's not the most important part of the aspect, but you definitely want to make sure that is not what gets you put on the side.
Yeah, or at least so I have a very interesting story. So when we were taking organic chemistry, everyone pretty much did very poorly. This is back in undergrad, did poorly on the second Orgo exam. And we were all like grumbling and moaning about it to the professor. And she was like, guys, how many of you guys are pre-med or pre-PA or pre-health? And half of the class raised their hand. And she's like, you know why organic chemistry is important? And we were learning about chirality and, isomers and stuff like that. And she's like, it's the ability to pay attention to detail. And that's going to be very important. And I think Kristy touched on this. That's going to be very important once you guys become a clinician, because guess what? One little wave of that EKG machine is 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters off. That's a heart attack versus a normal EKG. And if you don't have the ability to pay attention and you don't have that character of doing that, then medicine might not be the right thing for you. And it's little things like this, at least that the admission committee is looking for, that's going to determine whether your ability to, pay attention to detail is important. So I see what Kristy's saying, like, don't obviously lose sleep over it, right? It's like your grades, your healthcare experience and things like that are really what's going to make but don't make the, the small mistakes of grammatical errors, things like that. And especially for me, and I could attest, Jacob knows this, I'm not good with grammar, right? Like I had to have someone look at my personal statement so many times, but everyone's going to have a different opinion on your personal statement, because I will read something and I'll be gravitating towards a certain point, and Jacob or Kristy or Trina might be gravitating towards a certain point. It might stick out, but just make yourself stand out, right? Like what I tell people is that your experiences of what you're doing now, whether it's mission trips, volunteer, community service, your healthcare experience in the military, nursing, whatever, that's the experiences or the stories that you're going to be able to put in your personal statement. If you have nothing interesting to talk about, you can't fabricate it, right? Like you'll be making your personal statement generic as everyone else. So create that story now, whether you take a gap year to do it or whether you're doing it undergrad, start creating that story that you can really make your personal statement stand out. So anyway.
Yeah, and Jacob, that's a good point. If you don't have someone that you feel you can rely on to look at your personal statement, that is where some of these services like the one that you guys offer can be really helpful. If maybe you're a first generation immigrant or something like that. So maybe like your parents or your family don't speak English well, or they don't write English well. So they wouldn't be maybe the best person to ask. And if you don't have a professor or a mentor or someone that you can ask, then yeah, maybe you do want to pay for a service to look at these things for you. But yeah, I would agree. Don't lose sleep over it. Make sure it's, you've had someone review it, make sure you've done your best, but recognize that it's one part of a lot of other things.
Absolutely. Next question, what personal statement has been the most memorable, resonated with you? So whoever wants to.
I can tell you one that I still remember, and it was someone that we accepted into our program that I interviewed a while back. He had a relatively rare genetic disorder that affected him physically. And he discussed in his personal statement how he overcame that. It happened to be that because of this, he was introduced to the PA profession through going to healthcare providers and whatnot. And he tied that both into his personal statement and also into his interview. And it was something that was also obvious physically. And so the fact that we had read his personal statement beforehand, we understood this, and then we had that context when he was talking about this during the interview, it was really memorable to me because it tied in very nicely with his personality. You could tell that he was very passionate about medicine because of what happened to him. This was an example where, his health history and his personal history, family history, all of that, really tied in well with his reason for wanting to be a PA. And so that was something that really stuck out to me. It stuck out in the interview, and he was actually someone that we ended up accepting. And so that was one, I think, when I think of personal statements, I always think of his. He was willing to be very vulnerable, I guess. We've had several applicants who I can remember their personal statements or their interviews or the conversations that the admissions committee has because they were willing to be really vulnerable in their personal statement and or their interviews, and it made an impression on the people who read that and spoke with them.
Trina, anything that sticks out with you?
Trina, someone's asking you to finish your story that you got cut off on earlier.
She was answering the question.
Yeah, I just think, like what Kristy said, it's being vulnerable when it's appropriate, really, I think, shows their personality, and that could be anything. Like the applicant that she's talking about, I know which one she's talking about, and he really had a passion for becoming a PA, and it was obvious in his personal statement and in his interview, and even just throughout the application, it was obvious. And so, you can make it obvious in that way. As far as giving you hard details on how to do that, I just think, like we keep saying, your application needs to show what kind of a person you are, what your personality is, what have you gone through, what challenges have you faced, how have you overcome them. Those are the kind of things that you want to include.
Got it.
And what was the story? Was that?
What do you
I'm
mean?
sorry?
The story that
You got cut off on, do you remember?
Oh, the story that I got cut off on earlier? Sorry.
Yeah,
My device got too hot. Oh, so the one that had all of those hours, because he contacted me, I researched it with Caspa, and we realized that that was a Caspa mistake. And so, you know, he went through the regular review with the faculty, but he did qualify, and he unfortunately would have qualified for those 2 years that he was disqualified had he reached out to the program and had they figured out it was a mistake.
Wow.
So this is why it's so important. Like, he might have already been a practicing PA before he got an interview and everything. That's what I'm saying. So that's why it's so important to follow your emails and keep up on everything. You just can't let any of that go. And that goes alongside with what you guys are all saying about being a detail-oriented person.
Right.
All of that, and following through and making sure you're providing all the information and everything that needs to happen. And so, you know, you can call Caspa, there's a help center, and you can, if you're transferring your application from one cycle to the next, you can go on the phone with them and confirm with them, and you can continue to confirm with them all throughout the process. It's not like once you submit, you're not dealing with them anymore. That's actually not the case. And we've also had quite a few examples of applicants that didn't get, they were told by Caspa that the transcript got on there, but the transcript that got on there was someone else's transcript, or it was an incorrect transcript. And that's something that was caught kind of late. And so that's why it's really important for you to be thorough and make sure that what you're giving Caspa and what you think they have is actually what they have. It's not a lot of mistakes. I mean, I've probably looked at almost, I don't know, close to 6,000 applications now since I started working for SCU. So out of 6,000 applicants, maybe it's like 50, but what if you're one of those 50? What if that's you and you could have qualified for an interview? You might have gotten a seat, but because something happened, you didn't get it, you didn't qualify. And the last thing I'll say is a lot of other programs are not as communicative, not all of them are. So sometimes you don't even know that. So that's why you just have to do your own due diligence to make sure that whatever you think is on your application is actually there.
Absolutely. Okay, so now to the interview questions. What qualities are you looking for in an applicant you are interviewing?
So if you go on our website, on SCU's website, and I'm not sure how transparent other programs are, we actually list qualities we're looking for, which is great. And we don't do the typical traditional questions. And so since we know applicants are on the PA forum and other things and they're communicating with each other, you know, we may interview 5 people and all 5 of them may get different questions. So it just kind of is where the interview goes. And our faculty has a list of questions, but they may not even get to all of them. You know, it just depends on how you are as an interviewer and, you know, how you go, how are you in the interview process? Are you answering the question very quickly and moving on? You know, there's just very different things. So I know, like I said, I keep on saying the PA forum, but someone was very upset because there was questions that they didn't expect. And it made them very angry. And they said that on the PA forum. And me and Kristy were really surprised because we felt like we were pretty nice and getting the jitters out and welcoming everybody and trying to tell them what to expect. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that answers that pretty well.
Yeah, so a couple things. This is on our website and you can see what preferences we have for certain applicants, but a few things that we specifically look for are compassion, knowledge of the PA profession. So it is a little bit surprising sometimes how people don't understand what a PA is who are applying to be PAs. So make sure that you understand what a PA is, shadow or work with a PA so you have day-to-day experience to pull from. For us specifically, we also want to make sure you know what integrative medicine is. Again, these are things you can Google, but it's kind of surprising the number of interviewers we have who have no idea what integrative medicine is, even though that's in our mission statement and vision. It's a core value of our program. We look for people who have grit, integrity, like that have shown perseverance in the face of adversity. And that could be something personal. It could be with your grades, or, you know, if you're an athlete, you can pull from that or something. But yeah, our PA does require that universities or PA programs list what preferences they give, as I mentioned before. So you might be able to glean some of that information from the website.
Perfect. What type of questions do you ask when they ask if you have any questions for them?
Ask what you want to know about the program. Remember that you're interviewing them too. If you get invites to 3 different PA programs, you need to make a decision on which one you want to go with, right? And so you want to make sure that you have a good idea of how that PA program operates. So don't ask questions that are on the website. Don't do that, but make sure that you come in like knowing what you want to get out of the interview. If you want to understand how their curriculum is, maybe something that you weren't able to access from the website or from a virtual event, ask them that. Like, we sometimes get questions on what do you look for in an applicant? What makes an applicant stand out? We might get questions about our curriculum, like being systems-based or not. Someone asked that in the chat earlier. So at SCU, we have a systems-based curriculum. Not everyone has that. Not everyone wants that. We get asked questions about the integrative component of our program a lot of times. So try to tailor it to the program if you can. Make sure it's something that you actually want to know about that program. But do always have a question in mind, because a lot of times during any interview, and this goes for job interviews or PA school interviews, they'll ask you if you have any questions, and it looks good if you actually have a thoughtful question to ask them.
Absolutely. Next question, how long does the interview process usually take, and how long after interviews do applicants typically hear from schools? So I think that's dependent on the program. Each program has a different feedback time.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally program dependent.
You can get that information if you attend an event, or if you, you know, really look over the program's website. It should be on there.
Absolutely. What is the best approach to answering questions? Do you recommend showing personality or being straightforward to show decisiveness?
Showing personality for sure. You want to be succinct in your answers. You don't want to go off on huge long tangents, but find a way to showcase your personality and your experience in your interview questions. So always try to tie it back to something that an experience that you've had or something that has resonated with you. I can think of a couple examples where our faculty and our admissions committee felt like maybe an applicant wasn't a great fit because they were just kind of quiet and reserved and they weren't really showing their personality. And then they happened to ask them a question about something that interested them and they like perked up, and that made all the difference for whether we accepted them or not. So show your personality, absolutely.
Got it. What aspects of the interview process surprise applicants the most, and how do you recommend the applicants prepare?
I think this one is they're expecting the same standard questions. And when they don't get those questions, then they're kind of shocked. And, you know, I think for us, we are trying to shock you, honestly, because sometimes that's what it takes to pull out your personality, you know, like Kristy mentioned. And so how you prepare would be, you know, have someone else that's a PA or have someone, a family member, a good friend, have them ask you questions that you're not expecting. Questions, you know, that might be a situation based, you know, like you have a patient that comes in and they don't speak the language that you speak, and they have an irate family member, like, you know, things like that you may not expect. And so I think that would be the best way to prepare, is to expect the unexpected and know how to go with it, know how to be flexible, know how to be adaptable, because I think being a PA is going to be flexible and being adaptable. So if you can't do that in an interview, then again, maybe this is not the job for you, right? So you need to be able to show that.
Yeah, and definitely review your application, because by the time you're getting interviewed, you may have applied 5, 6, 7 months ago, and you may have forgotten like what you put on your application for your experiences and your volunteer work and in your personal statement. And so make sure that you review your application beforehand, because unless it's a blind interview, which I have heard of some programs doing, although I'm not sure that that's really the standard, the committee is probably seeing your application, right? And so you can mention things that you want to highlight in your application. You can pull those out in your interview, you know. So if you do get a case-based scenario, you can say, oh, you know, I mentioned this in my application. I had this experience like blah, blah, blah. And then you can, you know, tie that all in. So at the end of the day, your interview should be you highlighting the things that make you stand out. Hopefully you've put those in your application as well. And then also you can add things that you didn't get a chance to put into your application.
Gotcha. Perfect. So what are the most common interview formats? How does
So this is very, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask, how do you guys do it?
So the way we do it is we've done different things, different years. We've done like a group activity. We've done, you know, like take a little quiz ahead of time. But typically you'll be interviewing with a faculty member and another PA, whether they're an alumni or, you know, a working PA in the area. But we always have 2 people in the interview, and the interviews don't last that long. I would say it's about an hour to an hour and a half. When we did it on campus, we would do a campus tour, but now we have a virtual campus tour. And we try to answer any quick questions for them prior to the interview. And then when their interview is completed, then they're just free to leave when we did the virtual one. But when we did it on campus, we did the campus tour after.
Got it.
Yeah, so the different formats I've heard of other PA programs using are individual interviews where you might be with just one person, but maybe multiple interviews. So you do like multiple short interviews, like one-on-one, but with maybe 3 or 4 different people. A lot of people do group panels. So in our case, we typically do 2 people in an interview room, but I've heard of panels of maybe up to 4 interviewing at one time. Obviously, some of them are virtual this year or in person. In a lot of schools, the interview day is not just the actual interview. Like Trina mentioned, there might be an activity, or you might have a campus tour. There might be something else. A lot of times you're in a room with other applicants while you're waiting. I know when I interviewed, we were in a room with like 10 different people, and I think they were probably observing how we interacted with each other now that I'm on the other side of things. So don't feel like you're not being watched at all times, because that might be part of the plan. But yeah, I mean, again, just be polite, be yourself, you know, say thank you, be someone who is remembered for a good reason, not a bad reason. And honestly, just like try to be yourself. I know it's hard to do in a scenario where you're really nervous like that. But be prepared for anything. Don't let the format of the interview throw you off, right? Like just be open to any format, prepare as much as you can, but, you know, recognize that things change on the daily, you know?
For sure. So is the interview solely based on getting to know you as an individual, or is there still a review of grades and application? I think you guys touched upon that. It's a combination of both.
Yeah, I would say for most programs, it's probably a combination of both. There are some programs that do blind interviews, which means that they've not seen your application. And so I think it's a little bit more difficult in that scenario because you really have to demonstrate everything about yourself in that interview. But I would say if I had to guess, the majority of programs have probably seen some aspect of your application before they interview you.
Gotcha. What is the one thing that would immediately disqualify the interviewee?
Ooh, good question.
How about a no-show?
Oh yeah, there you go. We're shocked at people who do not show up.
Yes,
That's
or
interesting. You guys get
not
that.
contacting the program when they're not going to come, just not showing up, not responding to the invitation to interview, just no response at all. Those are 2 that would be an automatic disqualify.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Even if you think, you know, I will say this, even if you've been accepted to another program and you think, I don't need to like go to this interview, I don't need to respond to this school, you should always be polite, because the PA community is still relatively small, especially in certain areas, right? Like a lot of our faculty are practicing PAs. You do not want to be someone who is viewed as being rude by the program because you just simply didn't respond to the interview invite, or worse yet, you just no-showed to the interview. That's incredibly unprofessional, but yet it happens every year. And this is unlikely to happen, but you heard earlier how there are PA programs who have lost their accreditation. We actually had a couple applicants who unfortunately accepted a position in a program who then decided not to continue with accepting students that year. And so they now have to find a new program to go to. So you don't want to take the chance that happens to you and suddenly you're back in the applicant pool with a program that you no-showed to, right? That's a really bad look. So take the few seconds to be polite, politely decline. That's completely understandable. but definitely respond.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. See, that's a good point that you brought up, because if God forbid you're in that situation and you didn't respond, and then you go back to that school. See, these are situations that people don't think of, because those rarely happen.
But it can.
But in those outliers, it shows your character traits.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So are interviewers graded on a scale, for example, 0 to 5, or is it binary, negative or plus, not prepared, prepared, etc.?
Totally dependent on the school. It would be really hard for me to even guess what other schools do. In general, a lot of interviews for admissions, and this goes from undergrad to grad, doctorate, whatever, do use some kind of grading scale just to put like a number to applicant characteristics. But if you look at like admissions research, there's pros and cons of doing that. So I know that there's a lot of programs that do that. They use numerical figures to, pinpoint certain characteristics. But your guess is as good as mine what other PA programs do.
Cool.
Right. So how do you feel about the applicants who are extremely and visibly nervous in their interview?
It's not always a bad thing. I can think of one person who was accepted into our program who was incredibly nervous. He was sweating, like he mentioned how nervous he was during the interview. And it by no means was like a no-go for him. Like we still really liked him. He was able to get his point across. We really liked his application when we saw it. We liked his personality, and we've all been there, right? Like most of the time you're interviewing with people who have been through some kind of professional program. A lot of times they're PAs themselves. We remember how nerve-wracking it is, so try not to let it fluster you and so that you fumble so much that you can't get your point across, but understand that like we're not like, hardened people. We have compassion. Like we understand that it's a nerve-wracking situation. And as Trina mentioned, at our school, we really try before you go into your interviews to lighten the mood and, keep things fun and whatnot. But even if that's not the case with the program that you interview at, just, try your best to get your point across and recognize that you being a little sweaty or something is not going to be a deal breaker.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know. So now is general Q&A questions. We got potential financial aid and scholarship opportunities for pre-PA and PA students. There are a bunch of them out there. Google research, you'll find a lot.
Be resourceful.
Yeah, exactly. Next question. Can people with less than a 3.0 get into PA school if they are close to a 3, maybe around the 2.9 range? I have 3,000 patient care experience and 15,000 healthcare experience. I'm retaking classes right now, and I'm planning to complete 36 credits by next year. So hopefully retaking classes helps my GPA.
So in that scenario, it's hard just based on that question to see if the 36 units he or she's taking is going to be enough to get him or her up to the 3.0. I know for SCU, it is a hard 3.0 overall GPA that you have to hit, as well as the core science GPA that you have to hit. But again, that's another thing where you need to research your programs to see what other programs require whatever the GPA is. So they may get into some program, but for our program, it would be hard just based on this criteria to see if that would be enough to get them to qualify. Because we tell all applicants that just because you meet the minimum does not mean you're going to get an interview.
Yeah,
and that's where Mypabox comes in handy, right? Because you did that earlier where you filtered by GPA and you were able to find that there were like 36 programs or something that allowed you to have less than a 3.0. So I would say don't let that discourage you. Just be very cognizant of which programs you're applying to. Use the Mypabox filter so you don't have to go to all 310 websites and figure out which ones accept your GPA.
Yeah, for sure. What is the best strategy for reapplicants? Do you recommend applying every time until you get in, or taking a year off to strengthen your application?
That's subjective.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it's really important to recognize where your weaknesses are and specifically work on those in between the cycles. If you, for instance, have a 2.8 GPA and you keep applying to programs that have a 3.0 requirement, there is absolutely no point in doing that unless they have, a variable, unless they have like a variable strategy to their GPA requirement. But if you know that, let's say, The average, for instance, I'll just use SU as an example. The average this year for paid healthcare hours was 5,040 hours for people who applied to our program. So an applicant who's applying to our program that has 2,000 hours, which is our minimum, is certainly eligible for an interview. But if they didn't get an interview, that may be one area that they want to focus on in between. You know, maybe they have a great GPA, maybe they just need to get another job, or take more hours on at their job, or just keep working at their job, or get a new job, whatever it is. That would be an area where they could strengthen their application. So, you know, there's obviously a financial component to applying to PA schools. The more you apply to, the better. But in the same respect, you don't want to be spending $10,000 on PA school applications. So I don't think that you need to take a year off necessarily, unless you recognize that, you know, you have a GPA that is less than the schools that you're applying to, and it's going to take you X amount of classes to raise your GPA to an A. And if you can't do that with, you know, during the application cycle, then maybe you do want to take a year off. But I think really the best strategy is expanding the schools that you apply to. I see a lot of applicants do this. Southern California has lots of PA programs. And so some people want to stay local. That's important to them. And so they just apply to the same, you know, 5 schools in Southern California every time. I would say by your second cycle, if you're applying to those same schools and you're not getting in, it would be really important for you to really assess if you'd be willing to go somewhere else and kind of broaden your scope of schools that you're applying to. Because as we mentioned, every school has different characteristics they're looking for. They all weigh experience differently. And you may be a really good fit for a program that you haven't applied to yet.
That's a good point. Good point. How are virtual shadowing hours looked at by admissions? Will admissions be taking into account the lack of availability of shadowing hours due to the pandemic?
This is very program dependent as well. At SU, we do not have a minimum requirement for shadowing hours, so it's kind of just nice to see on the application when you have it. And so, you know, we have no problem with virtual shadowing hours, but I do know we've been at admissions events with other programs that absolutely do not accept virtual shadowing hours, and they do have a minimum requirement. So again, it just comes back to looking on the website, understanding what's accepted, what's not before you apply.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any recommendations for membership applicants should have that will help prepare them for PA School as a future provider?
I think as far as membership goes, so joining any kind of association that allows you to join as a pre-PA. So certain state PA organizations may allow you to join, certain specialty organizations for PAs may allow you to join. I know AAPA allows you to join once you're a PA student. I'm not sure if you can join as a pre-PA, but any of the PA associations that exist, you know, wherever you live, could potentially be helpful. I personally like it when I see the applicants have joined some kind of PA association, because it tells me that they're dedicated to the profession, they're interested in it. And so I think that can be really helpful. If you have like a pre-PA association at your school or something like that, that can be helpful as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Do a lot of schools have other applications you have to complete as well as the Caspa? Yeah, so there are supplemental applications and things like that. But Kristy, do you?
I think that usually, Kristy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when you're on Caspa, it tells you if there's a supplemental application as a part of the Caspa cycle or as a part of the application for the different programs. Because I know in what I've seen is sometimes it'll tell you if there's a supplemental. We actually don't require that, but it's usually in addition to. There may be some programs that aren't using Caspa, but it's usually a supplemental application and fee that some programs are requiring at the time of submission. And I think it is indicated on Caspa.
Yeah, it should be, but I would definitely check the program's website just in case.
That's not always the case. So some schools that do have supplemental applications, they have their own links on their own websites that you have to use and submit applications. Though it may exist on Caspa as well, they do, like, I don't know that aspect. Do they have it on Caspa? Is it 100% yes? I don't know that, but I do know that a lot of schools do have links on their own websites, and some schools actually go as far and say that yes, you have to fill out an additional supplemental application on Caspa. So it's not a hard yes for all of them, no. So some schools do not have their supplemental on Caspa. A lot of them have it outside of Caspa, and a lot of them actually don't have the link available. They send you a link if you're invited for an interview.
Okay. Is it recommended to have a letter of recommendation from a professor, or is having letter of recommendation from multiple medical professionals better? So I think we kind of went over this during the PA Box presentation. Every PA school, every program is going to have a different requirement. So do this research early. There's no right or wrong answer to this. If you're applying to all, like say, for example, you're applying to 10 schools and none of them have any specific requirements, then by all means, then at that point, you have to kind of figure out who you're going to be getting the letter of recommendation from. But first research if a particular program requires particular letter recommendations, get those first, and then kind of take it from there. How to balance when to apply versus giving yourself enough time to finish prereq classes and gain more patient care, healthcare experience hours, especially if it is rolling admissions.
Yeah, this is something we touched on earlier. It is a balance, and it's something that you need to decide for yourself as an applicant. You kind of, again, apply to different programs at different times, but before you submit your application the first time, you really want to make sure you have all of the prerequisites that you need for all of those programs, even if you'll be doing it, throughout the year or throughout the application cycle. I think, as was mentioned earlier, look at kind of the averages for those programs of the applicants that apply there and who gets in, and see where you fall. If you think that, if you're way lower than the average patient care hours, and you know that you can get another 1,000 hours, or let's say during the application cycle, then maybe it would be in your benefit to delay applying, a little bit later. Again, look and see if they have rolling admissions. If they do, maybe you want to apply in the middle instead of the beginning, but not towards the end. If they don't have rolling admissions, then you may be someone that can kind of rack up as much as you can before you apply. Understand if they allow you to submit with pending prerequisites and what that means. So at SCU, you can submit with pending prerequisites, but we'll hold your application, which means we don't review it anyways until you meet all those requirements. So in that scenario, it may make sense to just wait to apply anyways. So try to get a sense of how schools handle those scenarios.
Interesting. Okay. As a second-year applicant, do the programs know the candidate is a return applicant and take that into consideration in favor of by seeing the areas I have improved in my application?
So if they answer that, that's a no.
Yeah, there's no way for us to know that you're a reapplicant unless you explicitly say it in your application or we remember your name.
Got it. As a second, oh, that was a copy. Okay. What is an important factor to look at when choosing programs to apply to? Should one apply to developing programs? Should you attend if a developing program is the only one you get into?
Yeah, so this is a personal choice, but every year I would say the PA admissions gets more competitive. So if you get into a program, I think that in my personal opinion, I think it's important to take that offer and go to the program, even if it's a developing program. It is not a bad thing to be a developing program. Oftentimes they take the student feedback, and they're much more flexible with certain things. You have the ability to shape a program. So, we're a newer program ourselves, and the students who came in the first and second year really shaped the program by giving, significant feedback on how we could improve things and, what to change. And so I would not let a developing program or a program on probation or provisional accreditation prevent you from going to that program, especially if that's the only program you got into. Because just because you get an interview one cycle and you get accepted does not mean that if you applied to that same program the next year, you would get an interview and get accepted again. So just keep that in mind. There's no guarantees when it comes to that.
Yeah, good point. And I think that's our last question.
Any final thoughts, Kristy, Trina?
My last thought would just be read the website, read your application, double check everything after you submit it. Like Trina said, follow up with Caspa, make sure that your GPAs are being calculated correctly, your courses are being categorized correctly. you know, that everything has been verified and went through, and just be yourself at the end of the day, right? Because you're going to be in a program that you want to enjoy being in, which means that they should value you as the person that you are, and hopefully they're a good fit for you. So it's not just a one-way street. You know, you're also evaluating these programs as you're applying to them, but make sure you meet their minimum admissions requirements, or it's just a waste of money to apply to that school.
Trina, anything? Because I have a couple things I want to say.
I think Trina might have gotten disconnected.
Okay. Sergio, you want to say anything?
No, I'm pretty much, I hope you guys found this valuable and, you know, get to hear insight from a PA program admission chairman. And obviously we gave you guys value into, you know, what it entails to apply to PA school. And the number one thing I would say is start organizing early, start getting your experiences, and, you know, and good luck.
Okay, sorry, I'm back.
Okay, there we
Sorry.
go.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Kristy said, and don't get discouraged. There are other programs that are communicative that'll try to help you as much as they can. And, you know, you're going to get into the program that you're supposed to get into. So if it doesn't happen this year, it might happen the following year, but just appreciate the process. Most of our applicants that don't get in the first time they apply, that get in the second time or maybe the third time, they come back and they come to our events and they share with pre-PAs like you, and they say, I wasn't supposed to get in last year. I needed this year to grow more. I needed this year for the clinical experience. I needed this year personally. So they recognize that even though they were disappointed that they didn't get in the first year that they applied, they recognize that that experience that they had the year between when they applied the first time and got in was valuable experience. And they probably use that to get in also in their interview or in their personal statement. So I always say, don't get discouraged, don't give up, just keep doing the best you can. And again, you're going to get into the program that you're supposed to get into.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So a few final thoughts from kind of my standpoint. I just want to touch base and give you guys a little heads up about the services that we offer. So personal statement and mock interview are services that we do offer. We currently do not offer pre-PA mentoring. That is a question that was asked a lot on the questionnaire. We don't offer that. That is something that we will be getting into down the line. It's just that that requires a lot of dedication from a particular person, and we're just looking for the right candidate for that to help people from that regard. In terms of the current service that we do have, the personal statement and mock interview, the person that conducts these reviews for the personal statement and that does the mock interview to you guys is a person that is a retired PA. His name is John Grafeo. He works with us. He used to be the admission director, and he used to be actually the chair of the director of the York PA program for a while. And then he was obviously also on the admission committee. He interviewed thousands of people. He's read through thousands of statements.
Jacob, sorry, just to cut you off. I don't think he was the director. He was admission committee faculty, and he did a lot of interviews. And yeah.
Okay, so he basically is the one that's going to be conducting all the personal statement reviews. So he's somebody that is knowledgeable in all this if you guys ever need that help. So that's kind of what I want to segue into in terms of personal statement and mock interviews. So obviously we're giving you guys a discount code if you guys want to use it to make a subscription to Mypabox. The other question that was asked very frequently on the questionnaire was, what is the benefit of Mypabox? We didn't kind of specifically talk about it, but if you guys didn't get that from this entire kind of presentation, then you probably shouldn't use Mypabox to help yourself. But if you do understand the value of what the platform brings to you in terms of saving you time, money from kind of applying to schools that you really shouldn't be applying to, because that is a cost. So then you'll find the value of Mypabox. And lastly, Kristy, Trina, thank you so very much for helping us get to this first pre-PA conference. You guys played an intricate role. We really appreciate your time. Your advice was amazing. That just kind of like summarized everybody else's thank you on the chat. So thank you very, very much. And we're pleased to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. And just to quickly go over the personal statement giveaway, if you guys, once we post this video up on our YouTube, you go subscribe and comment on the YouTube channel, and that's where we're going to pick the giveaway for the personal statement revision. Somebody asked.
And is that, where is a lot of them are asking where this recording will be. Did you guys put that in the chat? Or?
It's going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you type Mypabox on YouTube, you'll get into our channel. So make sure you guys subscribe and comment on, on this post. Just put in your, put in PA 2021, and we'll randomly pick. We'll put it into some website and randomly pick from there.
Absolutely. Again, thank you guys all very much. Kristy, Trina, we'll talk to you guys soon. Be well.
Thank you.
Too.
Thank
Bye,
you guys. Everybody stay safe, and best wishes to you on the application cycle.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.